Allora, primo appuntamento.
So, first appointment here in Bolzano. I don't know if in the audience there are some people who don't know me and who perhaps came out of curiosity about the topic. I don't speak German, so I hope that Italian is understood by everyone. Do you all know me? All right? We're playing at home. Good. I'm happy to be here, as usual. I invite all people, given the complexity of the subject I deal with, which is that of extraterrestrial visitation, to do their homework. Why? These beings who visit us are here for a very important mission that concerns the future of humanity. And today, as I have explained many times, in a situation of very serious crisis at all levels, therefore environmental, political, social, economic, etc., etc., the ideology of the people and the ideology of the power of the powerful is basically the same. Now, no revolution. Therefore, no change is possible if there is not a new vision of life. Because it's always from a new vision of life, from new religious, cultural, social, political, philosophical concepts, that revolutions were born, which, anyway in time, in history, have changed the connotation of human society. Today, this is in fact impossible on the human level because, borrowing and explaining in modern terms the words of Our Lady at Fatima, she says, Satan reigns in the highest places, determining the course of things. So today, all human institutions are governed by an ideology that we call satanic, which is the materialist ideology, that is bound to the powers that are those who create money. So there is no longer a true politics. There is no longer a free politics. There is no longer a true religion. So today, all human systems are governed by the world of money, which distorts and coerces the nature, determining a situation that in fact renders change impossible and wants to remain in the status quo. We are experiencing this in extremely serious forms in this period, because both what is happening between Russia and Ukraine and therefore NATO, and what is happening in Gaza, in the Middle East, have a single source, which is that of a system, which is the system of money, of Western capitalism, which is in very serious crisis. And when the capitalist system goes into crisis, it unleashes wars. That is, capitalism is by its nature inherently connected to the need to create wars, so we have already had two frightening wars, the First and Second World Wars. In fact, we have entered the Third World War. For now it is not declared, it is not official. However, those who inform themselves know well, let's say outside of what is the mainstream circuit, which is completely corrupt and lying, because it is in the hands of the masters of narrative. The clash with Russia through the skin of Ukrainians, in reality, is the Western world. First and foremost, the United States of America, Europe following. Why? Because the capitalist world is in crisis. It is the East, led by Russia and China. It's proceeding to create an alternative system. Perhaps better? I don't know. In my opinion, in the end, it's changing everything to change nothing. However, what they are doing, Russia and China or the BRICS, in fact goes to take away from the hands of the historical masters, who are the Anglo-Americans. It goes to take away the levers of power, and this the Anglo-Americans obviously don't want. Europe is completely subservient to this necessity, it no longer has a say, and within Europe we are everyone's doormat. We don't count for anything. We have a totally inexistent, incapable political class. We have a Minister of Defense who is in fact an agent of the national and international war industry, so we are in very, very bad shape. So these beings bring us knowledge. That is, they bring us a science different from ours. Obviously, I'm talking about official science. They bring us a different vision of the human being, more complete, where the material part is one of the two aspects of the human being. Then there is the spiritual part, therefore, science of matter, science of the spirit, which puts an end to the very concept of religion. So the paradigm shift with respect to the history of humanity is very strong. Comparing it with what these beings bring us, therefore, it is not conceivable that with simple conferences, one can acquire all this corpus of knowledge, which anyway, over more than 70 years of modern contact between humanity and extraterrestrials, is really a lot. So I always invite people to do their homework, and so I make available to those who want to know more some texts in electronic format that you can download either directly from my website in the free resources section, this one up here. I don't know, guys, if it's possible to close these lights in front. So, free resources, or write to the email info@piergiorgiocorrea.it, and you will download this series of books. Books that we have also printed in paper at a cost that turns out to be lower if you were to have them printed at a copy shop, or you can request them at this email, info@cosmicshop.it. Another important source of information that at this point I think you all know is my YouTube channel. Then there is the website of Giorgio Bongiovanni, contactee and stigmatist, where it is another important source of information, and also his YouTube channel. Recently, we have started a subscription-based channel that essentially has the purpose of offering contents and information, you could say more detailed and peculiar, that for various reasons we do not put on the YouTube channel, and it is also a form to invite people beyond what may be a mere shared ideal, also to support, anyway, the substantial expenses that I have to carry out, to do all that I do, because I assure you that the expenses are, over a year, are many. So the channel is by subscription, at a cost that is quite reasonable. For those interested, you can go to the homepage of my website, scroll down a little, you will find the subscribe button. This page will open for you where there are the different options to subscribe. For those who want to stay in contact with me, we have, therefore, also to know about the events, we have the event section in the website. Or you can write at the email, segreteria@piergiorgiocorrea.it. Then there's my Facebook page, there's the Instagram page, there's the Telegram channel, where you can automatically receive the notifications, especially on events, interviews, appearances, conferences, and seminars that I am doing. You can subscribe to the newsletter from this card that you find in my website, or by writing to the email I mentioned before. For those who want to explore in a much deeper way all the topics that I present, there are courses online that I also hold in person. Then those, let's say, that I go do end up in an online container that can be accessed by clicking this section of the homepage of my website, videos available. Now, we have changed it to seminars. Seminars available, where you find really a great quantity of courses, which are extremely more in-depth compared to what I can express in the conferences. The course on karma and reincarnation, which is the founding basis of our life, a law that is ignored, even though even the gospel is, in fact, centered on karma and reincarnation, even if then, religious orthodoxy denies that this truth exists. Among other things, I point out that having put reincarnation within the religious sphere is nonsense. It's like having put as a religious fact the fact that one has dandruff or scratches oneself. That is, reincarnation, if it exists, is a natural fact. It falls within a natural law, such that a spiritual entity enters a physical body. This obviously is subject to natural laws, not to religious beliefs. So reincarnation should not be a religious theme of belief. Reincarnation should be a scientific study. In fact, those who have proposed, from this point of view regarding the theme, and therefore through research, have discovered that effectively the human being has its tangible and visible part, has its energetic invisible part, but with some very sophisticated instrumentation that exists today, can be investigated and can be seen. So there is a lot of backwardness in this planet. Surely we have technologies, we have things that compared to 2 centuries ago are more than science fictional, but in fact, in the advancement of the sciences that explain the unique 3-part nature of the human being, body, soul, and spirit, we are almost at absolute zero. I'm talking about the general population. So there are very serious errors in the setting of the culture of humanity, and consequently affecting all institutions, such that today planet Earth, as a consequence of this ignorance of human beings, is in a very serious crisis. So we are in crisis as a society, but we have put in crisis the whole natural system with our senseless actions. A fact that denotes this madness is the existence of atomic weapons. Think that only with 4% of annual expenses, not military, but for the maintenance, design, the modernization of nuclear weapons, with all related structures, 4%, we would solve world hunger, literacy, and other problems, with only 4%. So, useless and harmful expenses that are subtracted from the well-being of peoples. Already this is a condition of madness, because civil society accepts this status quo. If we were truly an intelligent race and logical, we should stop society and say, we don't work anymore, we don't participate anymore in anything. Why? You powerful ones must eliminate the nuclear weapon that can annihilate us. With this crisis that has erupted between the East and the West, nuclear war is continuously discussed as a possible fact, so we are running very serious risks. But it's not easy. In the fierce grinder of our daily commitments, to focus in a proactive and structural way on this very serious problem, which, however, in fact, concerns us all, especially us Europeans. Because if a nuclear war were to break out between the United States and Russia, the battlefield will be Europe. Sure, maybe some atomic bomb will arrive in the United States, surely in Russia, but we Europeans will be involved. We Italians have very important American structures related to nuclear weapons. Here in Italy there are, I believe, over 90 American atomic bombs. Therefore, the situation is not at all good. Among the various themes that I have touched upon in the seminars, there are some particular ones. This is a study that I did on that nefarious period that was the pandemic, and especially referring to the imposition, even if then they masked it a bit, of the green pass for workers. There, that was a satanic ritual of sacrifice that these individuals who belong to the great masonries perform to have, from the dark powers, to have power. And here, in this seminar, I explain all aspects of this very serious fact. Another interesting seminar, and only one episode, The Last War of the Antichrist, the Present, and the Future, according to the Science of the Spirit, where I explain from a spiritual point of view what are the facts that have led to the current situation that involves NATO, Russia, Ukraine, and so on. Then we have the theme of the Caso Amicizia. There are 9 seminars. The theme of the Hollow Earth. Another very important theme that concerns our history, the conquest of the moon. Did you know that there is a great controversy? Did we go? Didn't we go? Many today think that we didn't go. In reality, we did go to the moon. But since the extraterrestrials who have many bases on the moon have prevented us from returning, because the secret American project was to put a military atomic lunar base, and from there, threaten all the nations of the Earth. Plus, they did a lot of crazy experiments on the moon. They also wanted to do atomic tests. And so the extraterrestrials said, "Stay at home, we won't let you come back." And so the power, what did it do to prevent civil society from insisting too much and asking why we don't go to the moon anymore? They put around the poisoned meatball of the moon landing hoax, where all the counter-information fell for it, that is, it swallowed the whole meatball. And so we fight among ourselves while no one goes to ask them. So, I have also addressed, in these seminars, the conspiracy of silence, also on the true nature of the moon, which is not as they show us. I invite you to go to the YouTube channel because I made a conference that is outside of the seminars, this one here. The Conquest of the Moon and the Extraterrestrial Implication, a reality skillfully manipulated. This you find free on the channel. It is a very important information where I show the extraterrestrial messages that were given in the period of the conquest of the moon, where these highly evolved beings invited NASA to not carry out those horrible projects that they had planned, which instead they did. So in the end, the embargo was triggered, and they don't let us go to the moon anymore. Let's come to today's topic. Today's topic, I have already presented it several times, but for this event in Bolzano, I decided to expand what is usually just the initial introduction of my presentations. That is, to expand and deepen the facts that gave rise to modern ufology, which are mainly 2. One is the sighting of June 24, 1947 by Kenneth Arnold. The other is the article that appears in the newspaper, Roswell Daily Record, that reports a dispatch from the military airbase of Roswell that reported the capture, or rather, the recovery, of a flying saucer near a ranch in the Roswell area. This thing is immediately denied the next day, but I want to present information that I had never presented before. Then, obviously, after the presentation, there will be space for your questions, both for the topics covered today and for others that perhaps may interest you. So, modern ufology was born on June 24, 1947. Note, it's not that before this date, UFOs didn't exist. They were already flying overhead. There are even reports. From the 1800s and earlier, however, extraterrestrial activity in modern times, and this date being a key point, changes its nature. That is, extraterrestrials have been visiting planet Earth for thousands and thousands of years because they are civilizations much older than us. We're talking about some of these civilizations. We're talking about billions of years of antiquity compared to ours, compared to us. But from that moment on, the operation of this aviation and of these beings changes. This is Mr. Kenneth Arnold, a young businessman at the time, 32 years old. He already owned a small personal airplane, a Cal Air, a 2. This is the name of the airplane. Basically, he intercepts a message because an accident had occurred. An accident had occurred. This is the Cal Air that he had. That is the model that Kenneth Arnold had that June 24th. It was of the type, like the Pipers in short, which are perhaps, compared to the Cal Air, more famous airplanes. Basically what happened was that a Curtiss C-46 Commando of the United States Marine Corps had crashed in the area of Mount Rainier in the state of Washington with 32 Marines on board. Furthermore, a reward of $5,000 had been offered for whoever found it, because they didn't know where the plane had fallen. So Arnold, who was traveling on his own, intercepts this message and says, well, maybe I'm in the area. I'll take a look around, and I'll pocket, if I find it, the reward of $5,000. While he moves with this intention, at a certain point, around 3 p.m., Arnold sees a squadron of 9 flying objects that were flying at over 1,930 kilometers per hour, that is twice the speed of sound. Now it should be noted that, at the time of Arnold, we still didn't have supersonic aircraft. The fastest aircraft anyway reached around 900 kilometers per hour, so there was no terrestrial object that could exceed the speed of sound. Not only these airplanes, these vehicles, were going so fast, double the speed of sound, but they traveled in a way that Arnold describes as that of fish, those that jump out of the water continuously, or when we throw a flat stone on the surface of water to bounce. So they were very fast and flew in an absurd way, according to terrestrial aviation logic. So Arnold remains shocked by this vision because obviously he sees something, being himself an aviator, that had no logic. From the point of view of terrestrial technique, therefore, these vehicles, which were of clear metal, reflect the sun, and Arnold is attracted by this sparkle and sees these new objects traveling in this way. The day after the sighting, Arnold tells his story to some journalists of the newspaper East Oregonian. The journalist, whose name was Nolan Skiff, used the term disc-shaped aircraft in the article he published the day after Arnold's sighting. This story attracts the curiosity of journalists and goes around the world. So at that moment, worldwide, this word flying saucer or flying plate comes out as something anomalous compared to what is the nature of terrestrial vehicles. That is, they begin to talk at a massive level about the possibility that vehicles not of this world were circulating in our planet. See, this is the title of the article. A pilot has seen objects that resemble a plate or sometimes disc. So flying plate or flying disc that were flying at 1,200 miles per hour in Oregon, which are about that speed I told you, that is double the speed of sound. Obviously, Arnold is contacted by the military because already some military spheres knew perfectly well of this reality, and then I will show you the documents. This is the report that Arnold writes and then signs in his own hand here. This is the shape of the object that Arnold sees. More or less, this is the shape. So there is a report that was released to the military, which remained classified for many years and then was declassified. You see here there is the stamp. The stamp, however, a small part remained redacted. Arnold's event made the rounds of newspapers and was also picked up by magazines that began to emerge at that time and that were dedicated to mystery and also to ufology. And this is the first issue of the very famous, it will later become very famous, this magazine in the United States, Fate. It's an issue from the spring of '48, so the year after Arnold's sighting, which features on the cover the drawing of how this sighting occurred, and you see that it is proposed again by the cover or by the artist who drew the cover of Fate. Here is Mount Rainier drawn. Exactly the type of structure, more or less, that Arnold had drawn is proposed again, which is very different from the classic photo where you see Arnold with an image of a disc, of an object that looks like a boomerang. I believe even if there is no information of this type that confirms it, that the military told Arnold to use a shape that was a bit more assimilable, because then there were controversies, because already the Nazis were experimenting with aircraft, with a single wing, which then became the modern stealth. But in reality, the true shape of the objects that Arnold had seen was this. This is confirmed because in those days anyway, there was a huge UFO activity. Radars, which already existed, identified these strange flying machines that traveled a bit here and a bit there, above the skies of the United States, and that were worrying the military, except a niche of people related to the military world, to the world of intelligence that already knew, because the first flying saucers recovered actually date back even to the early years of the Second World War. There is a testimony, there is a photo, or rather two photos to be exact, which are these. Because on July 7th, '47, so the day before that article came out in the Roswell Daily Record, William Rhodes, who was an inventor astronomer in Phoenix, Arizona, spotted and photographed a UFO whose shape was basically identical to the one that Arnold had spotted. The object is backlit, and obviously then the, let's say, quality of Rhodes' camera is questionable. Then Rhodes is the inventor, that is, the one who discovered the so-called Rhodes gas. Then he made other important inventions that ended up both in the field of the world of initial electronics, so of television, and I believe something also at the space level. So he was a science person. He was not just anyone who would go and make up or throw plates in the air, because then the military took these photos and discredited them, saying they were flying debris. But in reality, you see the shape of the object
che Arnold, scusate,
excuse me, that Rhodes spots, that passes over him, then turns, and in this second photo, the object is quickly moving away, is going away. Rhodes was also an amateur photographer and took these two photos, which the FBI then acquired, and then the military took them, saying they would analyze them. But nothing is known about the analyses. They simply said afterwards that they were flying debris. Let's look again for a moment. As you can see, the shape is basically identical to the UFO spotted by Arnold compared to the UFO photographed by Rhodes, young at the time. Here it is. This is an article that says, this flying object has been photographed twice, and so on. And this is Rhodes at the time of the facts. This instead is Rhodes a bit older, who, I repeat, provided this very important document because, among other things, they are the very first photos that demonstrate the existence of UFOs. We are in 1947, July 7th. So ufology had just been born. However, in fact, there were still no ufological books and researchers on UFOs and magazines on UFOs because Fate, the magazine that you saw before, came out in 1948. So these events, that of Kenneth Arnold, very well known, and this of Rhodes, almost unknown, but very, very important because, I repeat, the photos taken by Rhodes testify that what Arnold had seen was true, and that these vehicles, who knows, maybe, they were part of the same squadron that Arnold had spotted. So, here are the first important events given by the globally known Kenneth Arnold, and almost unknown, as far as ufologists know very well, of the photos, of Rhodes' photos. But I don't know how many of you knew of the existence of this documentation. I have known it for many years, but I had never shown it. Then this time I decided to revisit. I repeat, the beginning of ufology in a much more extended form. Indeed, the discussion will be focused on all the events that happen in those months, in those very first years, because a lot of very important things happen. Then, we have the Roswell crash. On July 8, 1947, in the newspaper, Roswell Daily Record, the news comes out that the RAAF, which has nothing to do with the English RAF, Royal Air Force, the RAF is the Roswell Army Airfield. That is, it was the air group stationed at the Roswell Air Base, a semi-unknown town of New Mexico, but very important for the facts that I'm explaining to you now to follow. Basically, this article comes out, which is not an article by a journalist, but it's an article that is based on the testimonies that then resulted in the Roswell Air Base releasing a press release, in which therefore it is the military that brings out the news, saying that a flying saucer had been recovered near Roswell. See? No details have been revealed about the flying saucer. An Air Force general says they are not doing experiments. So, a mess happens that day, of which, however, almost nothing emerges. But a big problem happens because the news, in this case too, goes around the world, is reported by various press agencies, for example. These are two agencies of France press that say a flying saucer falls into the hands of American military authorities, Roswell, New Mexico, July 8, 47, the 509th Group of American Aviation Bombing announces that it has taken a flying saucer that will be immediately sent to higher authorities. Then there is a second, what we today call ANSA, right? There is a second communication, again from France Press, The Mystery of Flying Saucers, Roswell, New Mexico, July 8, 1947, Lieutenant Warren Haught, officer of the airbase in charge of press relations, made a brief statement after the discovery of a flying saucer by Commander J. A. Marcel, who would be Jesse Marcel, in a ranch located near Corona. In reality, the crash happened closer to the town of Corona, however. Having the Roswell Air Base been involved, and moreover, having the dispatch come out on the Roswell Daily Record, they talk about the crash or the Roswell crash, but in reality the crash is much closer to Corona. And this time it generates confusion because it is thought that they are two different events. Instead, it is the same event. Lieutenant Haught specified that the intelligence officers of the 509th Group of the 8th Air Army have come into possession of a flying saucer. Thanks to the help of the ranch owner of Chavez County and of the local sheriff, people that now I'm going to introduce to you. In reality, the journalists of France Press make a mistake because the real name of the military, who was the press officer for public relations, is wrong. It was actually Lieutenant Walter George Haught. This gentleman here died in 2005 and born in 1922, who at the time was the public relations officer at the Roswell Air Base and specifically of the 509th Bomber Group based in Roswell. It was Walter Haught who released the initial press release about the recovered flying saucer in the countryside of Roswell, or Corona, if you will. But Haught was a simple lieutenant. He didn't have the authority to make that statement. That statement was ordered to him by his commander. The commander of the Roswell Air Base was this gentleman here, namely the Colonel William Hugh Blanchard. This gentleman here is the one who gives the order to give the press release on the recovery of the flying saucer, while the owner, who finds the debris of the disc, is this gentleman here, William Ware Mac Brazel. He was a rancher, a cowboy, let's say, classic. We are in 1947, and it is he who goes to the sheriff of Roswell. And the sheriff of Roswell goes to see the debris, realizes that there is something very strange in this material, and decides, or rather they decide together, to go to the airbase to inform the military. The airbase then immediately sends two officers, so Mac Brazel, the rancher, notifies George Wilcox, the sheriff of Roswell, who involve. Then, that is once they have informed the airbase, Major Jesse Marcel is sent, and Captain Sheridan Cavett, who is this gentleman here, always belonging to the 509th Bomber Group, and they were both from the intelligence department, so they weren't simple military, they were also secret agents. These two are accompanied by Mac Brazel and Wilcox, and both see the wreckage of the UFO. And the UFO, they don't find it where Mac Brazel finds the debris, because, in reality, the territory where the debris was recovered was very vast, because the UFO falls and bounces on the ground for several kilometers. So every time it hit the ground, it lost parts of the structure and released this debris. In fact, afterwards, the military calculated the route, because in reality the UFOs had already been spotted by the base radars. And eventually the military, patrolling, managed to find the spacecraft. So, Jesse Marcel and Cavett don't see the UFO, but they find the debris, which was very strange. And basically, Jesse Marcel When he is returning, with all this debris on the truck, stops at home, and Jessie Marcel's daughter sees this debris, but her father orders her not to talk because he realizes that there was something anomalous. And Mac Brazel, for example, tells that they would take these sheets that looked like tin foil sheets. They would fold them and crumple them. Then they would let them go and they would return to their original shape without showing any kind of wrinkle. That is, it's the first time that human beings find shape memory materials. That nowadays we have them too. Not only was this material soft and very light, and no matter how much you would crumple it, it would always return to its original smooth shape when you stopped handling it. But furthermore, they couldn't scratch it. They tried with knives, eh? It was in fact impossible. It was so hard despite being thin and light. It was so hard that they couldn't scratch it. What happens? All this, in the higher spheres, creates a frightful turmoil, because in reality there already existed. Then I will show you a document, a couple. There existed a secret American commission for the study of UFOs, because the first recovered UFO dated back to 1941. So there was already a military leadership, including the President of the United States, who knew about the presence of extraterrestrial aviation on Earth. Now, however, let's put ourselves in the shoes of these people at that time. World War II has just ended. The Cold War is beginning. And at that moment, the American military and political leaders are thinking about a terrible plan, which is this: bombing the entire Soviet Union with atomic weapons and conventional bombs of very high potential to prevent the Soviets from developing nuclear weapons, which they will do only 2 years later, in 49. So there were 2 years of time where America could have implemented this terrible plan. Why didn't they do it? Because those areas were flown over by flying saucers? Let's find out. But it causes a turmoil. So what does the Pentagon do? It immediately sends a high-ranking general who departs from Texas to take control of the whole situation and deny everything. And the one who comes to Roswell imposes the denial of the previous day's article. In fact, the next day, General Ramey comes to the Roswell base. Roger Maxwell Ramey, who was commander of the 8th Air Force Group and of Fort Worth in Texas. This general rushes to Roswell. You see, General Ramey empties the Roswell saucer. Ramey says that all this excitement is unjustified. So, Ramey makes me deny everything and releases the article in the same newspaper that the day before had announced the recovery of the flying saucer. This is Scheriff Wilcox. You see, Scheriff Wilcox had a role of leader, of protagonist, in the excitement about the report of the discovery of the disc. Why? As soon as the article comes out in the Roswell Daily Record, the office of poor Scheriff Wilcox, who was essentially a country sheriff. Roswell was a small, anonymous town. They call him from all over the world, asking for information, and there is exactly the moment that Wilcox, the photo, now here it is of poor quality. Later I'll show you a better one. There was a somewhat humorous observation that I read from a researcher who says, in this photo Wilcox has the face of a deer that is illuminated by the headlights of a car because he is scared, because he has seen the extraterrestrial artifacts. He's a country sheriff. He's a sheriff of the community, therefore a good person who cares for his citizens. and General Ramey forces him to lie to everyone. Not only does he force him to lie to everyone, he forces him to threaten all the citizens of Roswell, because there are many who will see. This whole story, including the bodies that were recovered, in fact, one of the pilots was still alive, although injured. And so this poor man, who was a humble person, a sheriff of a small town, finds himself with the eyes of the whole world upon him, and even having to be dishonest. He who was the sheriff. That is lying to people, lying to acquaintances whom he obviously knew everyone, being the sheriff, and even threatening the witnesses of Roswell. So friends of his who had seen both the artifacts and the extraterrestrial bodies. This is General Ramey. Obviously, Ramey didn't take the initiative of his own accord. He was ordered by the Pentagon to rush to Roswell and to silence the whole story because at that moment, anyway, the Americans did not understand what was happening. That is, they found themselves with these highly advanced objects, with absurd technological performances compared to the techniques of the time. They didn't understand if they were friends, if they were enemies, and therefore they too were holding a hot potato that they didn't know how to handle. Then, having already recovered spaceships since 1941, there was another factor that enters into the Cold War theme. The alien spacecraft, given the highly advanced technology, became a treasure chest of scientific and technological assets to decipher and then to attack the Soviet Union. Therefore, they could not allow the news of the existence of extraterrestrial flying saucers to end up in the hands of the population, because the strategic issue was also a concern. That is to provide sensitive information to the Soviet enemies. So there were various things, not that I want to justify, but we are not in 2024. We are in 1947, so they were all very stunned by the discovery at the top levels, by the discovery that there were flying vehicles that were not of this world. Who are they? Why do they come? What do they want? Do they want to invade us? What do we do? What don't we do? And in the military documents of the time, declassified documents, this anxiety is there. I mean, you can perceive it. Today, obviously, I can't show you everything, but we must take a moment to focus and understand that that historical moment is not like today. I mean, at that time, there were no films about aliens, magazines about aliens, books about aliens, ufologists, researchers. There was nothing. There were only the military leaders who had discovered this stuff. They had it in their hands. There were some sightings, but consider that the first photos are those of Roswell, so there was almost nothing, so the military tried to understand how to best manage all this information. And so General Ramey had all the recovered wreckage collated together with the bodies of the extraterrestrials and had everything taken to his base at Fort Worth in Texas, of which, as I said, he was the commander. The crash territory was raked by the military shoulder to shoulder. Once they located the disk, they started from the first debris, from the area of the first debris, and the military were put shoulder to shoulder to cover the entire trail left by the UFO that had bounced on the ground, first standing, then kneeling. They made the military walk for kilometers and kilometers, so they had to collect and eliminate any evidence of all the debris, which was considerable, that the crash of the flying saucer had left. And the bodies initially, that is, all this stuff initially is brought to the Roswell base, and immediately after, when Ramey arrives, he makes me load everything, and has everything taken to Texas, to Fort Worth. And at Fort Worth in his office, Ramey, to give credit and support to the article that he releases in the Roswell Daily Record, that is, that there was nothing extraterrestrial. He organizes a press conference, has the debris of a weather balloon brought in, calls the photographer, and has these photos taken, which are then sent around to the newspaper offices to be published, saying that there was nothing alien, but they had mistaken apples for oranges, passing off the debris of a probe balloon, of a weather balloon, as something extraterrestrial. And in the photos we see General Ramey, we see Colonel Thomas Dubose, who was part of the base of Fort Worth. And here we see instead Lieutenant Jesse Marcel of the Aeronautical Secret Services of the Roswell base. He had understood that it was alien stuff, but he too is threatened and forced to lie. That is, you must support the version that it is the debris of a weather balloon. The truth. This thing, anyway, we are in an era, all in all, still fairly, in quotation marks, naive. So the American values of patriotism, of loyalty, of defense of the homeland were still very strong. So these people who believed in these values find themselves forced to lie to the people that instead they thought they were defending. And so they all have major crises of conscience, including Jesse Marcel, who on his deathbed, when he was already quite elderly, decides to reveal and to tell the truth. In fact, there are interviews that then later I will present where Jesse Marcel says, this stuff was not at all human, it was extraterrestrial. He even redraws on a sheet. Then there will be copies made in recent times, because on these bars of the structure of the fallen flying saucer, there were strange symbols that were extraterrestrial symbols. So with the press conference, with the publication of the article of the one imposed by General Ramey, the press conference, the photos of the weather balloon, Roswell falls into oblivion. That is, everyone falls for it. Roswell will not be spoken of again for 40 years. They will start talking about it again because the witnesses begin to talk about it. The researchers, by now there are UFO researchers, so important researchers like Stanton Friedman, takes up the case again. I have interviewed Friedman, I believe a couple of times, once in the United States, and another time in San Marino. I don't know. Have we published the interview with Friedman? We will publish it. We will publish it. Stanton Friedman, engineer, physicist, therefore a man of science, was one of the greatest researchers. Canadian. I had the fortune to know him personally both in the United States and here, in Italy, let's say, as far as San Marino. So also, Jesse Marcel, the rancher Mac Brazel. Everyone, in short, those who had seen are threatened and silenced. That is, they were not to say anything. Otherwise, they would have had serious consequences. So once the military intervened, especially Mac Brazel, the rancher, who had accompanied Jesse Marcel, Captain Cavett, to the crash site. Even Jesse Marcel, even Mac Brazel was silenced. But witnesses of the time tell that this rancher, in those days, reappears with a brand new pickup truck. So it is thought that someone gave him some money. Anyway, he was a rancher, so a cowboy. Maybe a rude and rough man says, no, I'll talk. And so they say, look, we'll buy you the pickup truck. Don't be a pain. Keep quiet. Here, this is the enlarged photo. You can see Scheriff Wilcox a bit better, who also, as I explained before, was threatened, and unfortunately had to take part himself in threatening his fellow townspeople, and lie to all those who called him from abroad, saying that it was not a flying saucer, not a UFO, but a weather balloon. Now, all these facts happen in 1947. The first hard disk of a megabyte. I believe it weighed 500 kilos. A hard disk of 1 megabyte that today we have tiny drives this big that are 250 gigabytes, 500 gigabytes. At the time there were still no computers, but I believe in the 50s. The first computer I think was called ENIAC, and it could do the 4 fundamental operations. It was a valve computer. It consumed as much as a power plant. And it was as big as an entire room. So at the time, not only did computer science and computers not exist, it was unimaginable that in the span of relatively a few years, they would arrive at computers like this one I have here. Consider that to do space flights, those who went to the moon. The computers that were used at the time were less powerful than the modern cards in washing machines. In fact, von der Leyen said that the Russians were dismantling the cards from washing machines to put them on rockets. This criminal. So it was unthinkable. So the same military slip up because they couldn't predict the future. So let's go back for a moment to the photo of Ramey together with Dubos. In the photo, you see Ramey holding a dispatch in his hand. Today, thanks to modern scanning techniques and computerized analysis, this dispatch has been enlarged, and it has been subjected to an accurate expert analysis. And they managed starting from this photo, obviously from scans of the original plates, most of which still exist because they were preserved, starting from the scans of the various photos. Where Ramey appears with this dispatch, you see, these are all. This one has been lost. This one highlighted in red has been lost. Of these other ones, the originals exist, which can be scanned at very high quality, subjecting to computerized scanning and to analyses by experts who obviously know how to do these things. In particular, there is one who did this study who is called David Rudy Hack. If I'm not mistaken, he's from the University of Texas.
Guardate un po'.
Look, they have reconstructed some of the phrases that are reported in the dispatch that Ramey holds in his hand. And we clearly read, the victims of the disaster that you will send to. And it references, so it talks about victims, it talks about a disk. If it was a weather balloon, no one can travel in a weather balloon, and even less can it have pilots who then become victims. So, we find the words and the victims of the incident that you have reported to. Then the rest can't be read due to the crumpling of the paper and aviators or visitors, this word is uncertain, in the disk that they will send. So, today, with this analysis anyway, it's an analysis that was done after 2000. In fact, we know, we have the certainty, but actually, we don't have it only for this, but it's an important document that tells us that Ramey effectively rushed to Roswell to impose silence and lie. And while he has arrived, and has to do everything in a hurry because the article came out on July 8th, and he, on July 9th, already has the denial released. So he does everything in a rush to try to plug the hole of the leak of this information, so carelessly, but obviously not thinking, that in the future one could come to such a point. And he holds in his hand a dispatch that probably is a dispatch, either that was sent to him, or that he sent to his superiors to inform them of what had happened.
Per cui, ripeto, se fosse stato
So, I repeat, If a simple weather balloon had been recovered, it's obvious that the word victim and disc wouldn't have made sense. So the decoding confirms the statements that have been in a truly gigantic number, released by the witnesses, military and civilian, now elderly, who have spilled the beans. So let's go back to the article of July 8th of 47, published in the Roswell Daily Record. Thanks to the press release drafted by Lieutenant Haut on the order of the Roswell Base Commander, Colonel William Hugh Blanchard. Let's examine the text of this dispatch, because this dispatch too has remained in the historical archives. And the dispatch reported the whole story of when Mac Brazel finds the debris of the disc. The dispatch said, "The many rumors about the existence of flying discs have become reality yesterday, when the intelligence unit of the 509th Group of Bombardment of the 8th Air Force of the Aviation Field of Roswell, RAAF, came into possession of a disc. The Air Force has provided the removal of the disc from the rancher's property to examine it. So, is it possible that a commander of a very important air base, of an unknown but very important little town, but now I'll explain why. At that moment, the Roswell base is the most important base in the world, that almost no one knows, but it's the most important air base in the world. So there weren't unprepared military personnel, and even less Commander Blanchard, Colonel Blanchard, was less unprepared than what an intelligence service agent could already be of the base like Jesse, Marcel. It's impossible that two military personnel of that caliber had mistaken the remains of a weather balloon for a flying disc. Already the logical analysis of the phrases that are used are peremptory. The many rumors, because there were sightings and anyway, there was talk about the existence of flying discs, so there weren't videos, there weren't photos, there were witnesses who said, "I saw a disc flying." So flying disc, meaning a flying saucer, have become reality yesterday. The intelligence unit of the 500th, so secret services of the base of the 509th Group of Bombardment of the 8th Air Force of the Aviation Field of Roswell, with the collaboration of a rancher and of the sheriff of Chaves County, has come into possession of a disc. The sheriff is Wilcox, obviously. The Air Force has provided the removal of the disc from the property of the rancher to examine it. That is, you don't call a whole base to remove 4 pieces of a weather balloon, and so already in the communication there is the truth. That is, you understand that a military officer with that responsibility cannot write something like this if he's not 100% sure. So it's impossible. In support of the truth of the finding of the disc, and that there really was a crash, it's impossible that Blanchard and Jesse Marcel, the major, had mistaken a trivial weather balloon for a flying disc. Let's look for a moment at the career of William Blanchard, just to understand what kind of individuals and importance was moving at that moment in the Roswell base. Blanchard, examining his career, one can evaluate his caliber. For starters, he was the backup pilot who had been chosen in case the main pilot, Tibbets, the second who would have had to bomb Hiroshima with the atomic bomb, was precisely Blanchard. So he was an officer of very high level, a pilot of very high level who had even managed the campaign of the first bombings on Japan. And Blanchard was also part of the team that did the atomic test in Bikini Atoll on July 1st of 46, after the experience gained with the atomic test in the Bikini Island. Blanchard takes the place of Colonel Tibbets, who is the pilot who drops the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. and becomes the commander of the Roswell base. So after the mission in Bikini Atoll, he receives the task to remain in Roswell, and even Blanchard has the task to train and equip the B-29 bombers, heavy bombers, with nuclear attack capability. Bombers that become operational for atomic bombing right in 47. Is the connection clear? We have a super expert of military techniques related to the use of the atomic weapon, even able to train the pilots and assemble the necessary technical conditions on the heavy bombers, which were called B-29 Super Fortress, for how big they were. So Blanchard at that moment is a prominent military figure at national level, if not worldwide. So someone like that couldn't mistake a weather balloon for a flying disc. So what happened? Since anyway he's a man of that caliber, you don't go to Blanchard, who has that importance, at that vital moment, because the confrontation with the Soviet Union is beginning, and you can tell him, if you speak, we'll kill you. You go to undermine an important person that you need. So probably Blanchard was told, look, they explained to him how things were, except that you've mistaken one thing for another and will reward you. In fact, Blanchard had an extraordinary career until becoming even Deputy Chief of Staff of the American Air Force, 4-star general. So in 48, Blanchard is assigned to the Strategic Air Command of the 8th Air Force Headquarters in Fort Worth as Director of Operations. That is, Blanchard ends up in the base that was commanded by General Ramey. So he doesn't end up in a random place. Subsequently, after having already had the experience of training B-29 pilots, he is sent to train the crews of the B-36, which are the first intercontinental atomic bombers of the United States of America. So, the first planes that could depart from the United States go to bomb Russia, become operational after the Roswell crash, and Blanchard reached the rank of 4-star general and precisely had the position of Deputy Chief of Staff, so an officer of very high level at the time, who accepted to remain silent, obviously, as a military man, understanding that communique that he had made had put in very serious embarrassment given the high stature of his character and all the American General Staff military. So it's impossible that he is an inept fool who mistakes a weather balloon for a flying disc, has afterwards a career of that level. So, it has been, let's say, collecting these elements, it's evident that it was all a conspiracy to silence the truth about the real finding of the alien spaceship recovered at Roswell. Then in reality the recoveries will be 2, and now we will see it in the military documents. What is the problem? That these high-ranking military officers, Major Marcel and Colonel Blanchard, didn't know anything, that there already existed an Institute of Intelligence of the Secret Services that managed the information on UFOs. Even less did they know at what level of secrecy the extraterrestrial matter had been placed. So, taken by surprise by the finding of the disc, they decided, as patriots, to reveal it, not realizing that in reality, a military cover already existed that imposed secrecy on this topic. But I repeat, ufology was in fact being born in those days. Nobody knew anything about all this, because there didn't exist any kind of literature about it. And so it's in that moment, with this action and this lie, that it becomes evident to the analysis of researchers that a conspiracy of silence already existed, because the first committee that would become known was created in 1947 by Truman. But after the Roswell events, that is, Truman would create it afterward. But there existed another committee that had to manage this information that remained super secret until very few years ago. Nothing was known about it. So let's see the real beginning of the conspiracy of silence, or cover-up, as it's called in English. I'll explain to you after who this is. This instead is Jean-Gabriel Gresley, born in 1932, a person of a certain importance and member of the Commission, 3AF, French Commission for Aeronautics and Space, is part of the Sigma Pan on unidentified aerospace phenomena, that is, on UFOs. Gresley enlisted in the Army in 1951 and was a trainee pilot. In 1963, he then became a civil pilot of Air France, and he was a captain for 20 years. But during his career as a military pilot, he was sent to the United States to be trained to provide training. And he becomes interested in the UFO matter. He has some experiences, and having become familiar with his stay in the United States, especially with the law on freedom of information, Gresley decides to use it. Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. But he has a stroke of genius, because all researchers always make requests through the FOIA. To whom? To what is obvious. Who do you ask? You ask the military. You ask the Ministry of Defense. Because it's the military that hide, so they will know. Gresley gets an idea. Let's do something. Let's ask who doesn't understand anything about this stuff, and possibly thinks they are nonsense. So Gresley forwards the requests to the Ministry of Grace and Justice, which has never been interested in UFOs. So the Ministry of Grace and Justice, being the one that legislates, takes the rules of FOIA literally, that the military obviously get around to not say the things they know because they must keep silent, and they dish out everything. They give him all the documents. To this day, almost nothing is known about this stuff, because Gresley's books have only come out in France. And there's everything. Consider this. I am in possession of, because then he showed me where to look, the technical report of the engineers who went on board of the flying disc. Today I don't have this report because it would become too long. They climb onto the disc. What do they look for? Leverages, cables, the connections to the ailerons. They don't find anything. That is, they find everything that, according to the aeronautical science of that time, cannot fly. There is nothing of all that that should be on a flying vehicle. And so they go. It's all. We hypothesize that, we think that, perhaps that. Because it's a science so advanced and so different that these engineers don't understand anything. The first document I'm showing you is a document from the early 40s and involves two people who apparently never had anything to do with ufology, because ufology was born in 1947, and these people are the Chief of Staff, George Marshall, hero of the Second World War, and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who will be succeeded by Harry Truman. And among the documents that Gresley has brought out, think about it, he has made 3 books on this material. And I still haven't read them all because I don't speak French. I'm having them translated. And the first documents concern a fact that happens in the United States, exactly over Los Angeles, on February 24, 1942, an event which has been called the the Battle of Los Angeles. What happens? There is only one photographic document about this, and also a little film that at this moment I have not included. There is this photo where we see, consider that we are on February 24th of 42 over Los Angeles. Los Angeles is on the Pacific coast. At that moment, the main cities on the Pacific coast had been heavily equipped with air defense because a surprise attack from Japan was feared because the war had already begun, because there had been Pearl Harbor. Therefore, Los Angeles was defended by considerable anti-aircraft batteries and by powerful searchlights of the anti-aircraft defense. And that night there, basically, objects in formation are sighted. And it is thought to be a Japanese attack. Therefore, one of the objects is identified, obviously due to the very strong brightness, and the photo is nocturnal. You can only see the glare, but you can see then all the explosions of the anti-aircraft projectiles. These unknown flying vehicles are heavily bombed, but nothing happened to them. They wouldn't come down. There were casualties due to the fall of the heavy projectiles, wounded, and perhaps also a victim, a death due to the fall of the anti-aircraft projectiles. It was not a mirage, in fact. The Army confirmed that the alarm had been real, and that precisely due to the fact that there had also been victims and wounded, that the military were justified in the intervention they made, and still for the usual discussion of modern technologies being unimaginable at the time, submitting that photo to analysis revealed what the intruder was. That is, flying saucers flew over the city of Los Angeles. And the documents, which were obtained by Gresley, there is this very important one that bears the date of a few days later, so February 24th, it's 9 days later. And it's a memorandum written by General Marshall, Chief of Staff, top secret. And here there is a name that until the moment when Gresley brings out this stuff, no one knew, no ufologist, no researcher. Because we are in 42, we are still 5 years away from Kenneth Arnold, from Roswell, from Rhodes with those photos. And on March 5th, 42, there already existed a secret unit called Interplanetary Phenomena Unit. So they had already understood that extraterrestrials came to Earth. The communiqué says, top secret, blah, 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 written by George Marshall, General, Chief of Staff, so the highest military authority of the United States at that time. That is, Chief of Staff is always the highest military authority. And Marshall says, as indicated in my memorandum of February 26th, so already, there is a memorandum that he writes 2 days after the events, which are witnessed by that photo and by that article, that I sent you regarding the aircrafts over Los Angeles. I have come to know from Rear Admiral Anderson of the G2 Army, who is the director of the Naval Agency, who has informed the War Department of the Naval Recovery, so they found it at sea, of an unidentified aircraft off the coast of California, aircraft different from the others, without relevance, conventional explanations. Further investigations have revealed that the military aviation had recovered a similar aircraft on the San Bernardino Mountains, east of Los Angeles, which could not be classified as a conventional aircraft. This headquarters has determined that these mysterious aircrafts are in fact non-terrestrial, and according to intelligence sources they are in all probability of interplanetary origin. Consequently, I have given an order to the G Army to to create a special investigative unit for future investigations of the phenomenon, the Interplanetary Phenomena Unit, and report any significant connection between the recent incidents and those collected by the Director of the Information Coordination Office. And here, I have ordered thorough investigations to the entire War Department on the documents regarding the phenomenon of the unconventional aircraft, reported even from 1897. So, in military spheres, at the highest level, and obviously, also the political ones, because at that time, the presidents in America still counted for something. Until Kennedy, they had a possibility. From Kennedy onwards, they are just puppets. So this document is a bomb, because it demonstrates, document released, this one, document released with the Freedom of Information Act obtained by Gresley, which demonstrates that the extraterrestrial phenomenon was well known. So we go back now. Still on the track of the work done by Gresley, we go back and discover from behind the scenes all the commotion that there was with the findings of Roswell, with Blanchard's communique, carried by Lieutenant Walter Haut. Even Haut then, in old age, will reveal everything, that is, all these people talked. That is, not all the witnesses, but many have spoken. Then I always found Roswell a bit boring because this Roswell has been talked about for decades. However, in fact, reviewing it at the current state, and especially thanks to the work of Gresley, the whole thing takes on an extraordinary historical importance, because it allows us, who count for nothing, we are just cannon fodder, sheep to be milked and to be stripped to be sold to the highest bidder. Finally, even we have access to the rooms of power and understand how those worlds move. As far as we are talking of decades ago, but things haven't changed that much, eh? So, Roosevelt knew. There is another document, which I have shown at other events, where even Roosevelt says, everything must be kept hidden, because the Soviets could take advantage of it. And then, excuse me, since we have it, let's take it as a grace of God to make America the most powerful nation in the world. And so we stick it to the people, even the American one. Not only, there is a shocking phrase that he says, we must make the best use of the nuclear secrets found on the celestial aircraft. That is, the Americans find on board the flying saucer the key to making the atomic weapon. In fact, then, there are the documents that demonstrate, always brought out by Gresley, that the spaceships were seen by Einstein and by Oppenheimer. Have you seen the movie Oppenheimer? In fact, in those years, the ufologists wondered why Oppenheimer writes a very long document, which you can find on the internet, on how, in the hypothetical case that
un giorno avessimo incontrato civiltà extraterrestri, come ci saremmo dovuti comportare.
one day we had met extraterrestrial civilizations, how we should have behaved. You say, what does a nuclear physicist who makes the atomic bomb have to do with aliens? Because he had seen the flying saucers. So, on April 12, 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt dies 32nd President of the United States of America. Trump, what is he, the 37th? 42nd? 47th? And he is. Roosevelt was the only American president to have served 4 terms. Now they do 2, and that's it. He is succeeded by this gentleman here, Truman. who has become very famous for the terrible fault of having been the one to order the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You have seen the scene in the movie when Oppenheimer goes to say, "Please don't," and Truman says, "Take away this crybaby." So Oppenheimer understands of having put in irresponsible hands his discovery, but by then it was too late. In a letter dated July 9, 47, Truman gives proof of having come to know of the recovery of the flying saucers. The letter is intended for this gentleman here, who is General Nathan Farragut Twining, Deputy Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. So Twining will hold the position that Blanchard had. And this is the document. July 9, 1947. Harry Truman, this is the signature. Guide for the place Tenant General Twining. You will proceed immediately to the Central Command at the test field. So it is a vade-mecum on what the General had to do, to go, to see the spaceships. To the Central Command at the White Sands test field, which is a very important American military base. In order, among other things, White Sands is the place where then the first atomic test was made, the Trinity bomb. In order to carry out an evaluation of the unidentified objects kept there. So from Fort Worth, then everything is brought to the White Sands base. Evidently it was better equipped. Part of your mission will be to assess the current impact and future on the military, political, and psychological plane of this reality. In carrying out your study, you will maintain contact with the Army officials who operate in this area. Then, it is advisable that evaluations regarding these facts operated by the subjects involved are not influenced by personal opinions or feelings, as attitudes not in line could cause consequences. So, be careful not to get involved at a psychological or consciousness level. Act as military, and do not deviate from that type of logic. Then he says, in presenting the results of your mission, you will report in the most convincing way possible your estimate regarding the type, the severity, and probable consequences in terms of psychological assistance. We are in 47. Can you imagine a man of that era who finds himself in front of an extraterrestrial spaceship? Bodies of aliens? You can be shocked and have serious psychological consequences. This, for example, will happen to the First Minister, to the Defense Minister James Forrestal, who was part then of the top-secret committee MJ-12, but when he finds himself in front of alien bodies and spaceships, he goes crazy. That is, really. He has a nervous breakdown. He begins to speak in an uncontrolled manner, and in the end, they suicided him. They threw him down from the window of a hospital because he was no longer able to maintain the secret. Then he says, when your mission in New Mexico is finished, you will make a brief detour to the Commission's installation for atomic energy of Sandia, because on board atomic secrets had been found, to assess the situation and report to the Los Alamos personnel, which was the study center from which then where nuclear weapons were studied. And before going to White Sands, you will get in touch with General Eisenhower. So Eisenhower knew. That's why Eisenhower was contacted by Eugenio Siragusa, my spiritual father. They wrote to each other because Eisenhower then in 54 will meet an extraterrestrial delegation because, as a military, Eisenhower had known. So Eisenhower, who will become the future president, will succeed Harry Truman. And there is a document that is basically a copy of this one, only that there are other annotations and other data that are of the recipients indicated at the bottom of the text of this document. In fact, then Eisenhower will react in a certain way, becomes for a military hero of the Second World War, becomes strangely interested in the welfare of peoples, to justice, of the distribution of wealth. In fact, in 61, when he will make the last farewell speech, he will warn about the expansion of the power of the military-industrial complex, which, if it had not been put under iron-fisted control, risked overriding the American government elected by the people and take command, and in fact, make democracy something totally emptied of value.
E poi Eisenhower avrà 3 incontri con gli extraterrestri, di cui uno...
And then Eisenhower will have 3 meetings with the extraterrestrials, of which one in the base of Muroc, which today is Edwards Base, and 2 in the White Sands Base. Unfortunately, he will say nothing of the extraterrestrial reality. This is the document. It's the same as before, but there is this series signed by Eisenhower this time. So it's the same document of the vademecum to twinning, general twinning, but it is signed by Eisenhower. And there is a whole series of people who have been informed and who therefore knew of the recovery of the spaceships, and they are a copy to the Commander-in-Chief too, therefore to the Chief of Staff, a copy to the military attaché of the President, a copy to the Director of the Emergency Supervision Office, a copy the Director of the CIA, a copy to the Director of American Intelligence, a copy to the Intelligence Director of the Roswell Base, a copy to the Director of the Naval Office of Intelligence, a copy to the Joint Intelligence Objective Agency, a copy to the Committee Still of Intelligence, a copy to the Director of the Special Weapons Project of the Armed Forces, because that technology will serve later, to develop new types of weapons, and there is a very brief interview that was inserted in a documentary, specifically about Truman, who says, "Yes, we have discussed this in all the conferences that we have had with the Army. There have always been things like this. There have been flying saucers and other things. You know, if I am not mistaken," says ironically the President. Let's hear the voice.
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military. There's always things like that going on. Flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know, if I'm not mistaken.
Flying saucer si è sentito abbastanza chiaramente.
Flying saucer was heard quite clearly. Let's see now, very briefly, some of the testimonies that emerged many years later, so in the 80s, about 40 years later. So the night of July 4th, 47, which is Independence Day. Independence Day, famous film, about negative aliens. 2 young people, James Ragsdale and Trudy Truelove, were witnesses to the event. Basically, these 2 kids went, "Let's go to the desert, we'll set up a tent and look at the stars." Basically, they were about 60 kilometers from the town of Roswell. They set up camp, and at night they see a flying saucer that left a fiery trail, flying at low altitude over the area to crash about a kilometer from the point where these 2 young people were. They take the Jeep and head towards the point of the hypothetical crash. However, in fact, it was too dark. The terrain was obviously wild, so there were no paths, and they decide to return to base camp and go there the next morning as soon as it got light. So, they go back early in the morning. They see the debris. They see the crashed UFO. But shortly after, they hear some noises and see in the distance the military arriving, and so they run away. In fact, The guy had filled the Jeep with pieces of this flying saucer. And instead, the girl was very scared, having seen the military, and tells the boy, "Throw everything away, otherwise they'll put us in jail and possibly kill us too." So, a bit sneakily, they managed to get away without being identified by the military, who obviously were concentrated and were trying to find the flying saucer. Another very important testimony that emerged over the years was that of one of the daughters of this lady here, Phyllis Wilcox McGuire, which is her husband's name, who is one of the daughters of the Sheriff of Roswell, George Wilcox. Basically, she was not born, I believe, when the crash happened. But her mother in the 70s revealed to her, that is, obviously then Phyllis had, growing up, learned about this Roswell story and asks her mother, because the father had been involved, and the mother, obviously, wouldn't talk, but she insists, and finally, in the 70s, Inez Wilcox basically answers and says, "But what kind of object did Dad see? What was it like?" And the mother tells her, "It was alien." And then Phyllis, the daughter, asks her, "Were there bodies?" And the mother replied, "Yes, there were bodies. One was still alive when they were found." So Wilcox also saw the extraterrestrial still alive, but he eventually died. They had big heads and eyes, but small bodies. She said that my father was very sorry for them and had the impression that they were not receiving good care and that they were treated as enemies. I met in the 90s the chief of a Sioux tribe, Lakota Sioux. His name was Standing Elk, and he was the grandson of a redskin, who together with a group of friends had witnessed the fall of the spacecraft. Since they knew very well how the American military acted, he and his friends ran very quickly to the crash area. When they arrived, already in the distance, there were military personnel, and they recovered one of the living bodies, so there were 2 alive, and they took him away. For 2 years, they cared for him. However, since when the military inspect the UFO, they count the seats, a body was missing, so they understand that something had happened. And so they combed through the whole area, and this group of Sioux moved from cave to cave, this being, and they managed to save him. They called him the Elder of the Stars. And this elder, that is, this extraterrestrial being, instructed these redskins for the 2 years he remained with them. After 2 years, Standing Elk tells, his brothers came, let's say his extraterrestrial friends, and took him away. And they decided to make this information public towards the mid-90s. So I, Giorgio Bongiovanni, and other friends, together with former secret agent Robert Dean, went to Dakota, and we participated. We met with Standing Elk. We were invited to their camp, and they held a conference in this American town called Wagner, where they revealed to the audience present there were also other ufologists. This incredible story they had experienced. Standing Elk's grandfather and his friends. Phyllis recounts, my father told her the whole thing to his wife. So, Inez Wilcox had always known the truth, but they had kept silent to their children because the military had told them, if you speak, we will kill the whole family. In the 90s appears another very important witness, who is Colonel Philip Corso. Philip Corso is very important because he was one of the agents left in Italy and of Italian origins. Corso. He died years ago, but he was one of the agents left in Italy to lay the foundations of that institution that we later knew by the name of Gladio, So he was a very high-level individual, Corso. And Corso was of such a high level that he was the national security advisor to President Eisenhower. And during the 60s, with the rank of lieutenant colonel, he was the head of the Office of Foreign Technologies, which is that office that gets involved in the study of spacecraft artifacts. And it was he who went with the pieces of UFO technology to major contractor companies like Lockheed Martin to give them spacecraft pieces and tell them, study them and get something out of them. He wrote a very important book, this one, The Day After Roswell, where he explains all this stuff. Don't expect anything in our style. That is, he thinks like a military man. For him, aliens must be thrown out, destroyed. He sees them only as enemies. Only at the end of his career will he begin to understand that in reality, that story was a great possibility for humanity. But as long as he was in the military, for him, aliens were the enemies. They had to be eliminated. And so his whole way of thinking is also quite irritating. We were so good that we turned their own technologies against them. Poor things, however. I knew him personally because he came. After the book was published, there was an uproar in the United States, given the very high level of credibility of the individual, and he, in the book, reveals everything. Gresley had not yet brought out those things, so it was disruptive. In fact, the government attacked him. And our idea is that the CIA killed him with weapons, they gave him a heart attack, that they got rid of him because he, since he was a tough guy, was denouncing the government, saying, "Oh, but I am an honest person, how dare you?" And he was making an affidavit to denounce the government and the Pentagon. And so they made him sick. And he was the head of this very important office, which was the office that had to manage the recovered extraterrestrial technologies. The commander of this structure was this gentleman here, General Trudeau, who was a hero of the Korean War, a wild madman. He puts on sergeant stripes, takes the gun, puts on the helmet, and says, "Follow me," and he goes forward. The soldiers follow him to conquer a hill that the Americans couldn't capture. So he was by the soldiers. He was venerated like a god. And he was very, very intimate and friendly with Philip Corso. He gave him total trust. And so, Philip Corso had in his hands the top secret file on the Roswell recovery, along with some of the artifacts that had been recovered, and General Trudeau commissioned Philip Corso to bring the Roswell technology to the big contractor companies of the Pentagon. In fact, then, David Grush said that to this day the spaceships recovered are managed by Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, in short, the agencies that are part of the military-industrial complex of United States. In the book, Corso says, today lasers are in common use, integrated circuits, fiber optic networks, accelerated particle beam devices, the Kevlar of bulletproof vests. But their matrix were discovered inside the alien craft that crashed at Roswell, and their existence was extensively documented in the files that reached my office in the 60s, that is 14 years later. So all modern technology, the enormous acceleration of human technological advancement comes from there. For about 20 years they made mistakes, says Corso, because
Corso, perché questi ritrovamenti venivano affrontati.
These findings were approached starting from our science to reach theirs. And he says, we couldn't accomplish anything because it's a completely different science. He says, in the end we understood it, so we flushed down the toilet, our entire mental and scientific structure, and we did the opposite. That is, start from that technology to understand it ourselves. He says, from there, We managed to give the switch, the change, and to make then all these innovations, which, obviously, once understood, continue to go forward. I close the part of the witnesses with an individual equally high in level, which is the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who is the sixth man to have set foot on the lunar soil. Mitchell was born on September 17, 1930, in Hereford, Texas, but very young, he moved with his family right to Roswell. And so in Roswell, he learns about all these stories of the recovered UFO. After becoming world famous for his lunar journey, he returns to Roswell and asks all the witnesses that were still there, "I want to talk to you. Tell me what you have seen." And so Edgar Mitchell is another one who confirms that the Roswell events are real. This is a statement of his. The residents of the Roswell area were forced to silence by the military authorities who threatened them with serious consequences if they had spoken. But the citizens did not want to take the secret to their grave. They wanted to tell someone reliable, and they told me, who was from the area and had been on the moon. 10 years ago, I was received at the Pentagon to discuss the matter, and an admiral confirmed the story to him, promising him that the truth would soon be revealed to the public. The same officer, Mitchell says, now denies it. Evidently, he told him, "Oh, but what are you doing?" Why Mitchell speaks. Mitchell, publicly, has always defended the fact that humanity is visited by extraterrestrial beings. Then he denies having had experiences on the moon with extraterrestrials, but we know he had them. And then in space, he lived a very spiritual experience. It is certainly also due to the encounter with the brothers from heaven. And when he returned, he left NASA, and he founded an institute called, that is, the Institute of New Ethics. So, Mitchell, in his lunar journey, understood that if we want to survive, we must change course, and we must accept the relationship with these beings that come from space. So Mitchell is one of those who not only said that Roswell really happened, but who says, the government lies and hides the truth from us. An individual of that level obviously gives, now he's dead too. But not only this. Mitchell also said that one of the key aspects of the presence, one of the key aspects of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth, which is the next chapter of what I show you. So, Mitchell says, in Washington, D.C., a military commission composed of high-ranking officers of the American and British Army explained that, in many cases, UFOs have been in the vicinity of nuclear bases and missile sites. I add with atomic warheads that were disabled by UFOs, and has officially requested clarification from the government about these stories. Mitchell says, I was aware long before they were published by the military authorities. So we come to the context. Thank you. Are you getting bored? And when I found myself with these documents in hand, I'll say it a bit crudely, I enjoyed it like a pig. I said, really? No, how great. Because I bled myself dry. I finished this conference in the car yesterday coming to Bolzano, so I arrived like a wreck. However, these are also the roots of what then was my personal experience. It all starts there. So, I know it from this point of view, that is, from the point of view of someone who has approached extraterrestrials, but to know it from the other side of the coin, from the face of the enemies, that is, those who have hidden from us, lied, is still interesting. because, in fact, they are our peers, other human beings, who have impacted with this fantastic reality. Have they hidden it from us? However, anyway, they have maintained the historical memory, which today comes out with these findings, which completes the puzzle of what happened in the genesis of all modern society. And there is a factor that for me is very, very important, which at first destabilized me a bit. And it is the document where Truman says, "On the celestial apparatus we found nuclear secrets." And extraterrestrials? Give the terrestrials the key for the atomic weapon? At that moment, I said, I need to understand. Then I understood.
Poi ho capito. Ed è scritto nella Bibbia, che è il libro dove...
And it is written in the Bible, which is the book where we are told how God thinks, how God reasons, the good God, and also the bad one. Because in the Bible there are two opposing deities. One that says, "Do not kill," to the Jews, and one that says, "Always to the Jews," and one that says, "Always to the Jews, go, exterminate everyone, rape the women, kill the children." This little game is heavily exploited by a guy who ends in "ino," but in reality they are two gods, two deities. One that says, "Do not kill," and one that says, "Go and exterminate everyone," which is the one we worship. That alleged researcher, you've understood who he is, right? Well, his name ends with "ino." This researcher says things that are true, but his fanatical, ignorant followers don't understand one thing, that even today the situation is the same. Nothing has changed. We too worship a Christ who blesses weapons, a Christ who sanctifies wars, a Christ who dresses in luxury, gold, and power. Well, this is not the Christ who said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself, do not do to others." They are two different Christs. It's just that we are so accustomed, since childhood, to certain logics, that we don't distinguish.
Come può un vescovo andare a benedire il varo di una nave da guerra?
How can a bishop go and bless the launch of a warship? What Christ is he serving? In antiquity it was the same. So there is a Christ of a certain type and a Christ of another type. So the key to Truman's speech about the nuclear secret is, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So the extraterrestrials were tasked with accelerating all processes that humanity would have experienced anyway. So we would have reached the atomic weapon, but we would have reached it in 60 years, 30 years. Let's accelerate. Because all the self-destructive process already in place back then, which began when Satan asked Christ for 100 years of power, and Christ grants them to him for that reason. In fact, there is the vision of Pope Pius XI, who sees the earth split open and demons coming out onto the surface, infesting the planet, almost to the point of destroying the church, which is not the Vatican, it's us. The Church of Christ is the people who live according to the logic of love thy neighbor as thyself. The Vatican is something else. So all the scientific, military, warlike, industrial processes have been accelerated by extraterrestrials, who didn't tell us how to use them, They just put them in our hands. Let's see what you do. Because what was their logic? Respect for free will. We give you a knife. Here you go. Either we cut a slice of bread for a hungry child, or we kill an enemy. It depends on us. So heaven has put a power in our hands and said to us, let's see what you do with the power we give you, because the times must be accelerated so that everything arrives precisely at hour X, which is the hour that serves us, but above all planet Earth. That is, the cosmic order. Everything must happen before the end of the age of Pisces. And so it was necessary to accelerate. So Roswell happens 2 years after the bombing of Hiroshima, of Nagasaki, and of Nagasaki. The two events, another two terrible events, that mark the future of humanity. August 6th of 45, August 9th of 45, these two dramatic events came after the first test that was carried out in the area of the White Sands base at the Trinity site on July 16, 1945, which the whole story has been told to us by the film about Oppenheimer. So we definitively entered the nuclear era, which has already done enormous damage to the planet. Now there is this controversy between orthodoxy and counter-information about the nature of global warming. It exists, it doesn't exist. There are some who are just stupid. But it's getting colder and colder. But global warming is not that. It's getting hotter everywhere. Global warming is an increase in the average temperature of the whole planet. But the increase in average temperature triggers extreme phenomena.
Quindi ci sarà tantissima siccità o
So there will be lots of drought or floods. There will be zero wind and hurricanes. It's an extremization of the two aspects, hot, cold, calm, wind. Ettore Majorana had predicted that around the year 2000 a series of increasingly serious events would be unleashed, and we would reach hurricanes with winds at 700 kilometers per hour. A wind at 700 kilometers per hour tears grass away from the ground. Have you seen what's happening? It's starting to happen. It's true that strange ships are also circulating, but that's not it. Because the problem of global warming was triggered by more than 2,000 nuclear tests that have been conducted in our world, which have disrupted and put our planet in a terrible imbalance, breaking the magnetic field that gives it stability and creating an abhorrent situation of instability, which combined with all the other follies we commit, leads to the situations we've seen in Valencia, that we've seen in Emilia-Romagna. Then, there's human neglect and corruption. But it's not the cause, it's a contributing cause. So at that moment, the town of Roswell, which you see, a photo of Roswell in the 40s, wasn't just any place, precisely because there was the 509th Bomber Group, and it was one from this group, piloted by Tibbets, that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima with the Enola Gay. And it was always a bomber from the 509th group that bombed Nagasaki. So that airport at that moment is the most important airport on the entire planet Earth, because the atomic weapon at that moment was possessed only by the United States of America, who were thinking of bombing the Soviet Union. They had few. It is estimated that Roswell had about 6 atomic weapons, but they were ready for use. And this is a photo from that time, with the B-29s parked at the Roswell airport. You see, there was a road in the middle of the desert. It wasn't an airport as we understand it today, but the B-29s departed from there. And this is exactly the plane that bombed Hiroshima, the Enola Gay, signed by Paul Tibbets, who is the military officer who piloted it and who dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. In fact, here we see him, Tibbets, Colonel Paul Tibbets. Enola Gay was the name of his mother, so he gave the bomber that exterminated thousands of people. No, she wasn't a homosexual girl. It was the name and surname of Tibbets's mother. No, given the times one might misunderstand, right? And this is Tibbets. This is him. I believe a photo taken before departure. Tibbets never repented for what he did. He was asked, "But how do you feel even as an elderly man?" "Ah," he says, "I did my duty." So the presence of the flying saucer that crashed at Roswell was not a random event. It was certainly linked to the importance of the crucial RAAF military base. That is Roswell, Air, etc., with the atomic B-29s. And in that period, there had been a huge UFO activity. In fact, UFOs were monitored because Roswell, here is Roswell, then here is White Sands where they had experimented with the atomic bomb. Above there is Los Alamos, then nearby there is Alamogordo. It was, let's say, the area of interest where all military atomic science was being developed. So the extraterrestrials were keeping everything under control. In reality, then, of UFO crashes, that is collisions, there had been various. But in my opinion, this was intended by the extraterrestrials, who had to give the indisputable proof to the Americans that who was monitoring them was not of this world, because it was in their program, then to get to speak with presidents. In fact, afterwards there will be meetings with Eisenhower, and then meetings with Khrushchev, meetings with Kennedy. Then everything went sour. Kennedy, who was the only one who had decided to do things seriously, was killed like a dog on a public street. The occurrence of these events was not by chance. So since the early years of the atomic era, that is that period there, the presence of extraterrestrial spacecraft over atomic sites was evident. To the higher spheres of the military, they had understood that these beings controlled the nuclear installations. And the first recoveries of spacecraft, as we have seen in those documents, that have been recovered thanks to Gressler, proved it. And according to Gressler, and all the documents that he brought out, he confirms that UFOs have been sighted over the factories that produced atomic weapons, the military bases where they were installed. Gressler states, "The fact that these units have been flown over indicates that all atomic secrets were known to UFOs." Then he added that such secret nuclear sites were the places where UFOs manifested themselves the most. And this obviously at that moment could not help but, and we have the evidence. This is a magazine. Famous magazine of the time of 52. You see, already talking about UFOs. Flying saucers, the hunt begins. Reports among various. There is MacArthur, who is another who knew, and another who will be ousted because he was beginning to talk too much about the extraterrestrial presence. And inside there is an article, a long article, where a map is reported, which is this one here. The Air Force must begin the hunt for flying saucers. And then, we colored it. So I'll show it to you so it's clearer, see? Already in 52 they had statistically indicated the places in the United States where flying saucer sightings mainly occurred. And there are so many, so the aerial activity, of flying over military sites already in 52, so just 5 years after the events of Roswell, was already gigantic, that is, all the United States, were flown over by extraterrestrial aviation. The article says, this map has frightened the Pentagon. It indicates unexplainable sightings of flying saucers across the country, with concentrations near vital defense installations. Fearing a danger from the sky, the United States Air Force is launching a secret scientific research to discover once and for all what the mysterious and incredible objects that Americans continue to see above them are.
Strategia della distrazione.
Strategy of distraction. They are launching, but what are they launching? They already had. The Interplanetary Phenomena Unit of 1940-41. It's a manipulation. Yes, we are. Since everyone was seeing, then let's make them believe that we are getting interested, that we will do it, but in reality, we are already doing it. We already have the spacecraft. We already know everything. So this type of information was passed to these magazines because they came from the offices of the MJ-12, the Majestic 12, which was the super-secret institute that Truman created and which was then increased to a committee by President Eisenhower, who had seen the UFOs. So in reality, the military, at the top, knew everything, gave this type of information, I repeat, to manipulate public opinion. At the time, the situation was like this. Now look at how the situation is. This is a map of sightings over the United States from 1995 to 2014. Are we visited by aliens? No, practically we have them over for dinner every evening. 58,828 cases. Note, those reported. But most people who see don't go to the police or to journalists. So, it's much more. The fact that here there are fewer is only due to the fact that the concentrations are mainly in the most populated areas, but not because there are fewer here. This area here of Nevada, look here, here there is an area of interest because in Nevada there is another atomic test site. I'll conclude, because I'd like to leave time for your questions, but in reality I would have still a few things to show you. Yes, but at a certain point we have to leave. Then here in Bolzano, if the clock hand goes even a second over, already, there is someone who complains. So, this is just a tiny snapshot of what happened in those years. But for the power, it was a real earthquake. Oh damn, there are aliens. Now what do we do? What do we do? Who are they? What do they want? Where are they going? Their technologies are incomprehensible to us. And so there was fear. There was anxiety. Well, but what do? They organize and immediately cement the deception to the people. We must say nothing. We must be silent. And we must use these technologies to make weapons. And instead, we could have freed ourselves from hydrocarbons. Free energy. We could have built
delle abitazioni antisismiche,
anti-seismic dwellings, not pollute the planet. We could have done a lot of wonderful things because what happens in the meantime? That power recovers all these things and organizes to hide. In the meantime, extraterrestrials begin to speak. So simultaneously, contactism is born. That is, we give you the spacecraft, but we tell you who we are. We don't leave you in doubt. So, simultaneously with the classic ufological era, what I call nuts and bolts ufology that is only interested in the material aspect, contactism is born. So extraterrestrials begin not only to contact the military like Eisenhower, but, they say, since power sees us as enemies, because they don't want to get down from their privileged chair. Let's talk to the people. Let's see how humanity moves, and so contactism is born. And in, practically, almost all contact cases, major, minor. The other day I discovered another one and I didn't know it existed. Have you ever heard of a contactee called, guys, Trevor James Constable? Who did he talk to? With Astor Sharon. He was at the big summit that took place at Giant Rock, where there was Daniel Fry, George Adamski, George Van Tassel, and there was also this gentleman, of whom I have never heard anything, who wrote various books, studied the ether and spoke with Ashtar Sharan. Now I'll find the publications. There's already something I found. So in these messages, so they at the beginning started with a bang, our brothers from the sky. We give you the technology and we also give you how to use it for the good of all. We explain it to you. Then in the early 60s, there will be a very important mission of a Venusian who for 3 years will stay at the Pentagon with special authorizations, Mr. Valiant Thor, who was photographed in a meeting in the garden of contactee Howard Menger's house. And he was at the Pentagon for 3 years. Since he didn't, he dematerialized. They couldn't. They say, well, we'll give you a room, stay there. You can come talk to the president, talk to that one. He says, Valiant Thor says, oh, these people can't give up their protocols. He could dematerialize. They put 2 guards in front of the door. Sometimes he would dematerialize from the room, and then he would arrive and the guards would say, but weren't you inside? No. And they would say, do you have a pass? Yes. And he would show them his hand. There was nothing there, but he would enter the guards' minds, making them see that he had a pass. I mean, he had fun like that. He spoke with Bob Kennedy a few days before they killed him and told him, Bob, they have already killed your brother. Don't run for president, because they will kill you. He didn't listen, Bob Kennedy, and they took him out. Valiant Thor told him, in 4 years. Do it in 4 years, not now. It's not the time. Instead, he wanted to avenge his brother, Bob Kennedy. So contactism is born. George Adamski, Howard Menger, Eugenio Siragusa, it was born in those years. And contactism also produces extraordinary photographic documents. Oh, finally, we see these damn UFOs. However, since we've seen so many UFO images, the story is much more intriguing than sitting there watching the little UFO show, but some UFOs. This is the beautiful photo, taken at Mount Palomar, where there is the famous American telescope. At the time, at least, it was one of the most important. Photo of December 13th, 1952. Another beautiful photo that is part of a series, a mothership in space, from which flying saucers emerge that at first are masses of energy, and then, little by little, they materialize in our dimension and take the classic shape of the flying saucer. Photos that Adamski, how did he photograph stuff in space? He had made this thing, see? He had a small telescope, relatively small, and basically he had dismantled the lens of the camera, and he used the telescope objective as a lens. So he used the telescope when he spotted or perceived that the spaceships were present. He would point at them with the telescope. And thus he was able to create those beautiful photos. In fact, you can clearly see, this is the edge. This dark part is the edge of the telescope objective if it had been the camera lens. this wouldn't have, it's an aberration that is also created. If you use a fisheye, a wide angle, if you put it on the camera, if you pull back too much, the lens, capture the edge of the camera. So in this way, Adamski was able to take these incredible photos. Then Adamski's story. For those who haven't read it, I recommend reading his books. There are 3, the official ones at least. Then there is also other material that he published. But the story is beautiful. It's really a great cosmic adventure. These photos, instead, were produced by Eugenio Siragusa in the sense that Eugenio didn't have the goal or the mission to produce photographic evidence material. He had to pass to the world the highest theology of the beings of light, so of the solar triad, cherubim, seraphim, and thrones. However, Eugenio was a classic contactee. He didn't go up on spaceships. And sometimes, for example in this case in Lecce, with Mr. Antonio Giannuzzi, who couldn't see anything in the sky, but Eugenio would tell him, take a picture there, now take a picture over there, now take a picture there. Then when Giannuzzi would develop them, he would find the spaceships in the photos. So we have a flying saucer with a transparent dome that transits from the 3rd dimension to the 4th dimension, transits to the 4th dimension as a mass of energy, obviously with the pilots inside. The only photo that Eugenio Siragusa has taken is the most important document in all of human history, which is this one, the photo of a solar being named Adoniasis, a being that for us in every way represents the divinity. So the divinity, in the age of revelation, at the beginning of the cosmic era, decides to reveal itself to the world through a photographic document. It's an androgynous being. This is the female eye of love, so it's male and female at the same time, and this is the male eye of justice. It's a being of pure light, of pure energy. It's radiant. It was taken, according to what Eugenio said, of course, in March 1972 in Catania, in Via Monserrato, at the outdoor garden of a church, with a Minolta reflex camera. This is the most important document in all of human history. If Father Abraham had had the Minolta reflex, when the 3 beings, God, Lord, God, visit him, in his camp near the Chebar River, he would have photographed one of the 3, who was this one. This gentleman here. Other photos of flying saucer. This is the photo of a series of photos taken by Howard Menger during a landing. So we have the disk that is arriving. It's still semi-energetic. It emanates light. Here the disk is practically landing, and you can still see one of the classic spheres. At the time, the disks often had these shapes. We call them Adamskian disks. And here the disk has definitely landed, and the alien pilot has exited, who in reality then Menger said was a woman. A woman, Venusian to be exact. And there's another beautiful document that is a film that he made at the time. In September of 1958, Menger. In reality, Menger becomes famous, always in the early 50s, but his contacts date back to the early 30s. So by the time he became public, it was already 20 years that he had contacts, and the first contact he had was when he was a little boy. He lived in a countryside area. He liked to go walking in the woods. At a certain point, he meets this beautiful woman sitting on a rock of a superhuman beauty. who told him, prophesied, announced to him, anticipated to him that he would meet her sister who in the future would incarnate on Earth. And this fact then happens, and this woman became the wife of Howard Menger. I was in contact via email with her because I wanted to republish, in Italy it never came out, the book of the memories, let's say, of the contact of Howard Menger. We were coming to an agreement, then unfortunately she passed away. She was already very elderly, and the heirs quoted me hyperbolic figures. I said bye. Not, but this book is a bestseller? Yes, a 59 though. I mean, it's not a bestseller today. I proposed to them, let's do this, let's make an agreement, I'll take care of everything. Translation, publication, etc. Then we split the proceeds, I subtract the expenses. We make a contract with lawyers, the notary, however you want. I publish the book in Italy, and then we do 50-50. Grandpa used to say, better 5% of something than 100% of nothing. Because if you don't make the agreement with me, it stays there gathering mold. It's a book from 59, who cares? But they are historical treasures. Little by little, I'm recovering. The well-stocked American library of contactee volumes that never came out in Italy. Then in reality, I've already translated it, I've already read it, but I can't publish it, too bad.
Adamski è stato attaccatissimo.
Adamski was heavily attacked. He was told that his photos were the lid of a camping gas lamp, that it was part of a refrigerator, basically everything. But in reality, it's not like that, apart from the fact that his documents were appraised already at the time by important photographers, one we even interviewed in the 90s, very elderly. He was a Kodak expert who told us, but absolutely not. Technologies didn't exist at the time to make such perfect fakes. But there is an important case, the same that I may have presented a few times, which is the case of this boy. Obviously, at the time, Stephen Derbyshire, who, in Coniston, England, on February 15, 54, photographed a classic Adamskian flying saucer that was flying over Coniston Water in the Lake District in England. The image, in fact, became famous as one of the first UFO photographs in England, just like those of Rhodes, became famous as the first UFO photos, one of the first UFO photos of the United States. So this boy takes this photo with the camera, and there is an engineer named Leonard Cramp, who understands that this reality is true and that it has scientific interest, and Leonard Cramp became interested and studied the hypothetical science that was at the base of the incredible propulsive capabilities of flying saucers. He published various books. One is this, even introduced by George Adamski's friend, Desmond Leslie, Leonard Cramp. See? Space, Gravity, and Flying Saucers. And Leonard Cramp, when he becomes aware of Stephen Derbyshire's photos. As an engineer, what does he do? He says, well, let's see if it's true. So, basically, he makes an orthographic projection of Adamski's disk and compares it with the disk photographed by Derbyshire. He says, they are the same machine, undoubtedly. How could a boy make a fake of a UFO perfectly identical to the flying saucer photographed in the United States by Adamski? Absolutely impossible. And to Eugenio Siragusa, all contactees, as I said, are given the messages about nuclear danger, but mainly to Eugenio Siragusa, to whom was explained first, and then to Bongiovanni after. He was told the ins and outs, truly, of the atomic danger and their operational plan in case of nuclear war. I'll read you three. Eugenio has the first contact On April 30th, 62, on the slopes of Mount Etna, exactly, at the base of an extinct crater which is Monte Sona Manfre, a place where I have been many times, near the oak tree that today is quite grown where Eugenio met, Idakar and Ashtar Sharon, two archangels. And right in the first physical encounter, Eugenio is given a very long message of which I reread because I believe many of you know it. A very long message about the atomic danger and the opportunity that their presence was for all of humanity on Earth. Message to the powerful of the Earth, scientists, men of government. Despite ourselves, we must still necessarily warn you that if you continue to implement the crazy designs that you have set for yourselves with nuclear experiments, nothing can be done to prevent this world of yours from suffering a heavy blow of a disastrous and deadly nature. Be certain that if you find the strength and courage to build a solid union among all the peoples of the earth, and to achieve the complete destruction of all destructive weapons that still today, more than ever, make you proudly evil and morbidly aggressive, we will feel authorized by the love that binds us to you, since the origins of this solar system, to approach without any reservation to grant you the knowledge, the better science that would produce, for all humanity, a serene life, rich in happiness, of true freedom, and infinite prosperity. Therefore also material well-being. Not money, eh? Beautiful things, like this beautiful room, better. This message that we have dictated with great love, but with equal concern, is one of the most heartfelt invitations. Given the seriousness of the acts that you propose to implement, we have done a lot, and will continue to do what is possible to stem the worst. If you, rulers and men of science, choose the worst, we would only be left with the task of bringing to the outside of the irremediable disaster only those who have known and understood us, and who have loved their neighbor as we love them. Message of April 30th, 1962. It's very long, you can find it on the internet. But already this shows us the extraordinary opportunity that we have lost. Because these beings, if we had given up all that terrible politics that has been carried out, today we would live. We would already be travelers of the universe. Because they wanted this. That is, they desire the integration of Earth's humanity in their gigantic, confederated organization of evolved civilizations. They no longer have money. There are neither rich nor poor, they are all well off. But well off means well off, in comparison to which an Arab sheikh with gold faucets is a beggar. Choice that we haven't made. Nuclear experiments have alarmed the inhabitants of other planets. These are the main causes that have pushed them, as they have done also in remote times, to visit, with greater and more attentive activities of observation, the Earth. They are here with us because they know better than us what could happen at any moment. And while they are ready to intervene with all means at their disposal, to prevent the irreparable, they monitor the geoid, particularly its magnetic axis which, with the chain nuclear experiments, carried out in this period of time, has been shaken, with such intensity as to put in serious danger its already precarious situation of instability. This is the true secret of global warming, not the nonsense we hear around, that you have to change the muffler of your aunt's panda, etc., etc. These squalid individuals who are miserable, disgusting people,
come Schwab e tutta la cricca del World Economic Forum.
like Schwab and the whole gang of the World Economic Forum. A waiter who takes part in their meetings has said, they are so vicious and disgusting that when we bring them sandwiches with meat, not with crickets, with selected beef, they take the bread, throw it out, they eat the meat, and then throw away the bread. So crickets for us. First of all, it is necessary to prevent further nuclear experiments, as harmful to things and humanity, as lethal for the balancing process of the magnetic masses of our and other planets of the solar system. That is, we also damage the other civilizations of the solar system. Secondly, the peaceful union of all humanity is needed to protect its survival and to provoke the ideal requirements for an exchange of scientific knowledge with inhabitants of other worlds, of our own, that is, theirs, and of other solar systems. No, excuse me, so of our solar system and of other solar systems, much more advanced in all fields. We say that a great event is at the doors of this time. And like all great events in human history, it also undergoes the pressure of rejection of the non-belief, of the in quotation marks Superman, that is, you know, the imbecile on duty, yes? That is the Superman that they intend, then we will beep that. And of those who do not want to know because they do not see and do not touch, but we are seeing and we are touching. Now, humanity. The people are not aware of what has happened in the nuclear era. Today the tests, they have imposed us not to do them anymore. But this is the sequence of 2053 atomic explosions made on planet Earth, 2053 nuclear explosions, of which one, the Soviet Tsar bomb, has made a shockwave that went around the planet 3 times, has broken doors and windows up to 1,000 kilometers away, and has risked breaking the planet Earth in 2 because it was a hydrogen bomb. Thank God. They had planned it at 100 megatons. In the end, they decided to depower it to half, 50 megatons. They risked it. They got scared. They risked splitting the Earth in 2. These mad criminals. Let's see the tests. 1945, 1998. Starting from the nations that have done the smallest number of tests, here it appears the flag of the state. This is China, 45 atomic explosions. Imagine what kind. This is France, 210 atomic explosions. England, 45. The Soviet Union, 715. This concerns us Europeans. A great war will break out. Not today, nor tomorrow, but in the second half of the 20th century. (1032), the United States of America. A world of madmen. That's where they come from. The diseases, the climate issues, the earthquakes, and all the disasters that are happening on the planet. Primarily, it was due to this. Why the atomic explosions? The planet, however big, is not flat. As someone stupidly says, so each explosion has its angular momentum that imprints a thrust to the planet. That is, it doesn't go downwards. It has its angular momentum, therefore. It destabilizes it. That is, it changes its rotation. It unbalances it. And the radioactive fallout of all this filth has been frightening. The extraterrestrials have done an enormous cleaning job, because otherwise, with this stuff here, we would all be dead, all radioactive. Because there are nuclear explosions with columns, the atomic mushroom beyond 60 kilometers. They have broken through the entire atmosphere. This mass of radioactive dust ended up in the jet streams, which are very fast, and in a few hours spread radioactivity throughout the planet. So they have done a lot. The beings to clean up, but not everything. A lot fell to the ground. The residues of this stuff have been found at 11,000 meters in the Mariana Trench in the Pacific. But these things, if I show you the map, then another madness. The experiments in Nevada were all done upwind. Nevada is on the Pacific coast. All the radioactivity of the Nevada experiments went to, plastered all over American soil. That's why Americans are crazy, violent, also for other reasons, because they are super polluted by their government. And all these things were then revealed by the military. One of these, I met him, is Robert Salas, whom I interviewed. The interview. There's no time because I want to finish, I won't show it to you. And he was at that moment when the flying saucer blocks the Malmstrom base where there were Minuteman missiles, these ones, ballistic missiles with atomic warhead. And he is the protagonist of that night. When he... How do you say when someone finishes their military career? Discharged. He had been threatened nevertheless by telling him not to say anything. They also made him sign a non-disclosure agreement that he would never reveal. Since then he had direct experience with extraterrestrials. He doesn't care. Let them do what they want. I will speak anyway. And he started traveling the world and went everywhere, even to the American Congress last year. To the Larry King Show, he talked everywhere. I met him personally twice, the last time very recently in Barcelona at an international conference. But always with the law on freedom of information, used by Gresley. He pulled out the declassified documents, declassifying the documents concerning the Malmstrom incident of '67. And these are screenshots, you see? Flying saucers, fireballs, flying saucers. So, there is no more mystery. Now the problem is that this information doesn't get to the general public. And this is a photo of May 20th, 2018, 19th and 20th of May, when I interviewed
Bob Salas. Adesso c'è la disclosure.
Now there is the disclosure. Started in 2017. I am talking about it extensively. So after all these decades of lies and deceptions and of manipulations, etc., in 2017, with this article, the Pentagon informs human society that they were indeed studying UFOs. He presents himself, this American ruffian, ex-secret agent who for me is part of the manipulation, because now, since they can no longer hide the truth of the extraterrestrial presence, they have decided to bring it out, but to present them as enemy invaders. So a very powerful campaign of publicity has begun with declarations and release of footage. These have become very famous. Tic-tac footage, gimbal footage, go-fast footage. And they have begun to reveal very important individuals, including this gentleman here, Christopher Mellon, who is a man of the apparatus. The Mellon family is one of the great American families. It is not exactly like Rockefeller, but we are there. That is, he is part of that power group, this gentleman here. They are bankers, they are politicians. He was the head of intelligence of the American Senate. And when one of these people speaks, it is necessary to listen carefully to the words.
Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon. Christopher, do you believe the UFOs exist?
We know that UFOs exist. This is not no longer an issue. The Navy itself has publicly acknowledged the fact that they exist, and Navy pilots, active duty pilots, have gone on the record in the New York Times acknowledging the fact that they exist. So the issue now is, why are they here? Where are they coming from? And what is the technology behind these devices that we're observing?
Are there indications that these unidentified flying objects are doing things that this world is not capable of?
There are indications, actually. The Nimitz incident, a famous example of this, which was well documented by multiple radars, multiple pilots in broad daylight. That vehicle demonstrated speeds in excess of 5,000 miles an hour. It was able to hover 50 feet above the ocean after descending from above 80,000 feet. So the pilots who are observing these craft are absolutely mystified, and that comes through clearly in their public statements.
They are frustrated. They feel as though something should be done.
They're deeply frustrated, and that is the core of our show, Unidentified. We're giving military personnel on the front lines a voice. We're helping them get out the message, what it is they're encountering and why they're so concerned about it.
And we're not the only country who's having these encounters.
Absolutely not. And in fact, as our investigation unfolds over the first 6 episodes this season, we're going to be presenting information from a NATO ally that's been having very similar experiences.
All right, I want you brought a clip with you. I saw
Correct.
you carried the tape in with you when you in the green room. So here it is.
Mm-hmm.
They are invaders. This is a very important person. I said it. Mellon family, go look on Wikipedia. So when these people speak, they are saying directives that become operational. That he, national security, they are aggressive, they want to invade us. Because they can no longer stop this reality, they won't succeed. So the real question, dear friends, is this: will humanity manage to avoid the atomic apocalypse? We don't know. In fact, the events that are happening, we won't succeed. The process that is underway, the creation of the BRICS, the war between Russia and NATO, the de-dollarization impose, for the survival of that system of which Mellon is part, a war. Since by now they have all gone mad. Due to radioactive pollution, they will do it. I fight by informing and doing other things in the hope that these beings, who anyway have chosen me to inform you, they asked me to leave television. Speak to the public directly. The TVs censor you anyway. You've had the experience. Speak to your fellows, without censorship and without vetoes, without powerful figures who can condition you. I know it's the fight of the ant against the elephant, but it's also true that I have powerful allies. Very powerful. Who are these beings that, over the years, I am not a contactee, obviously, I am a researcher, but they have various options of interaction, and the interaction they have chosen with me is that of availing themselves of my professionalism of researcher, documentary maker who has worked with national and international television. So these skills, to speak directly to you and try to develop in the human mass a sensitivity that justifies their forced intervention and that spares this beautiful planet that gives us life, the offense and humiliation of an atomic war. That is, I said to them, well, can you do it? Intervene? And they say, but we intervene. We take away those who deserve it. Yes, but the planet, why should it? That is, already. It has lived. The filth of all these atomic explosions, the exploitation, why do we still have to offend the planet? They say, well, we must obey our laws. And there is a problem. The human mass that wants this is too small. God does not grant us this intervention that would be a derogation from universal law. And this derogation only God can give, authorize. And so, convince God to give this derogation. We will do it with all the love, because we have the technological, scientific, and military power, of peace, obviously, to do it. But we must intervene and take away your freedom. That is, we should put a protectorate, deport all the negative part of humanity, so we can avoid atomic war. All right, I said. I will apply the law of raise your ass. Let's see what happens. So I am here. So I'm here. Of direct experiences, indirect experiences, sightings, I don't even count them anymore. I've had a ton of them. In Italy, in Sardinia, in the United States, in Latin America, many, I don't even remember them all anymore. So there isn't a problem. The historical part was missing. The photographic documents, we have the footage anyway. The flyovers continue. Now there's the case of Juanito Juan that I'm following. We talk. The other evening, I was with my finger on the elevator button. Who's bothering me? It was 11 o'clock at night. No, because when he calls me, 40 minutes is the minimum. Indeed, he kept me on for 40 minutes. I went back to the car because it was cold. He wanted to chat, so we stayed on the phone for a while. But right now, Juanito Juan is the most important witness of the extraterrestrial visit. His photos are fantastic. This is a series of shots he took in front of his house of a classic flying saucer that was stationary. Photo 1, photo 2. As soon as he starts taking pictures, the disc, see? It tilts. And then in photo 3, it shoots away. Very fast. He was in the company of a client. He is a humble auto body mechanic. And he has a small workshop at his home. The photos have gone around the world. A high-resolution photo of a UFO shows a 50-foot disc. 5 by 3, so they are about... Yes, 15 meters, right? Yes. That emerges from a cloud before vanishing into space. It's the Mirror, an English newspaper. But these photos have truly gone around the world. Beautiful spacecraft. I believe the object is even larger because the entire hull is in shadow. Only a small section is illuminated. This indicates that it is a very large object. Photos that have been extensively analyzed. Among other things, it is accompanied by a satellite sphere, which are objects they use for viewing at very short distance from the disk. So they act as detection drones, as cameras, because in the immediate vicinity of the disk, the magnetic field that allows the disk to move in space, let's say, somewhat distorts the vision. And so you see, it's here. It's not, the image is absolutely genuine. 3 spheres with the classic flying saucer. August 29th, 2023. Beautiful photos. I've been to Valle Hermoso. This is the little house in front of his home, where he photographed that disc. Juanito has been experiencing these things since he was a child. He is a person with paranormal abilities. He also speaks with the dead, sees the deceased. And this channel also allows him to have the sensitivity that extraterrestrials use so that he can photograph them. This is the moment when I'm interviewing him. We are in a hotel in Valle Hermoso. This is a photo that was taken by him. 3 days that we were there, it rained constantly. We didn't see one ray of sunshine. As soon as we left, beautiful sunshine, you see, flying saucer very high in the sky. Obviously, to make these enlargements, Juanito sends me the originals so we can analyze them and, moreover, prove that they are real. Moreover, the disc is basically identical to a flying saucer photographed on January 1st, 52, in New Jersey, in Passaic. It's a very famous photo, a series of shots. This is a photo taken by Gaspare de Lama in Milan, Caso Amicizia, and this is Juanito Juan's in Valle Hermoso. Flying metallic spheres. Beautiful shot. This is the roof of his humble workshop. This is the cemetery of Valle Hermoso, and the spheres are directly above his house. These photos have been analyzed too. This is very recent still. Classic flying saucer, see? Here, high in the sky.
So the
flyovers continue. These beings insist, hoping that, instead of looking at the ground, human beings, perhaps hoping to find a wallet or something, look to the sky and understand that salvation comes from the universe. Thank you. Thank you. If there's a microphone, I'll answer some questions. It was a tremendous job, but I'm happy to have presented. Did you like it? I'll do a special, I think I'll have to do perhaps 3 seminars on Roswell, because there is truly so much interesting stuff. Then these documents from Jean-Gabriel Greslet are really spectacular. There's everything. I mean, it seems like Pinocchio's Pleasure Island. I mean, there's everything, all their secrets, what they said to each other, what they wrote to each other, the people. Incredible. I have a friend, but this is a true story. A friend who, through a series of events, brought me a small bag of lunar sand. A small bag of lunar sand, yes. I held it in my hands, beautiful. A piece of cosmos in my hands. Another time they gave me a bag full of meteors. It's nice to touch these things. They come from space. Once I entered a university in Mexico City. There's an iron meteorite, this tall and this wide. We are in prison on this planet. I've been traveling the world for more than 30 years. It's small. As long as you always live at your home, in your nation, yes, you take some vacations, but you don't perceive it. If you travel a lot, in the end you realize that you're in prison. You can't get out. I mean, you look at the starry sky. By the way, here in Bolzano it's beautiful because the sky is much cleaner than in Marchi. Last night the moon looked like a lit beacon for how brilliant it was, and the stars that stood out so clear against the deep blue of space. That is home for us. We are ultimately, as Alan Sorrenti said, children of the stars. All of us are born on a sun, perhaps this one, perhaps another. We were born there. We're not of this world. We are born on stars because solar beings, solar deities, give birth on stars. Then, they send their children to experiment in the various schools that are the planets. So in reality, we travel in space, but we travel as unconscious spirits because the law of reincarnation sends us to the planet where we must learn the lesson that we need to get further than where we are today. So, in fact, we too are stellar travelers, but unaware ones. In fact, they asked the extraterrestrials of the caso Amicizia, but you, which planet are you from? We are from the planet where we are at that moment. We are travelers. Our home is the universe. When you have technologies that allow you to cover millions of light years in a few instants, everything is within striking distance. I mean, it's there. Think about St. Francis, who moved on the back of a donkey or a horse. It was unimaginable at the time to go to New York in 8 hours. Today you can get up in Rome, have breakfast in a Roman bar, have a snack in New York, and have dinner, I don't know, in another part of the planet. I mean, technologies allow us this. So today we, especially those who, like me, travel a lot. I mean, the planet is your home. You no longer see distinction. I mean, you go here, you go there. If then you have friends in America, you have friends in Latin America, you have friends in Russia, you have friends in Europe, you have friends everywhere. Are you Italian? No, I am a terrestrial. This planet is our home. So these absurd divisions, these wars, these killings, the Israelis who want to exterminate the Palestinians. Then for karma, if there were a hypothetical future, it will be the Palestinians who exterminate the Israelis. And because they were, the Palestinians are the Philistines, those who had enslaved the Jews, who were then freed by Samson. But then the Jews were slaves of the Philistines. Today they are the Philistines, ergo Palestinians, slaves of the Jews. But this spiritual feud does not stop. So all those spirits that have been killed by these fierce Israeli bombings will return and will take revenge. This feud must be interrupted. We have been inside this feud for millions of years. We can't get out of it. In fact, extraterrestrials call our planet Ceres. It's a palindrome name. It reads the same from both sides. It means repetition of error. We always repeat the same error. As history teaches, wars have never resolved anything. First one conquers, then another conquers. We were the Roman Empire. The entire ancient world was Roman. Today, Rome is just a squalid den of thieves, sold out to another empire, the American one. So all these wars, for stupid material things, that end with death, are foolish. So we are a very backward humanity. I mean, we are savages. We are troglodytes. Yes, we put on a suit, a tie, we have a car, we wear perfume, but we are barbarians. We are technological barbarians, bad people. We get up and we are always belligerent. Always belligerent. As soon as someone touches you, already immediately, the snake comes out.
Magari uno la mattina si alza un po' stordito.
Maybe someone wakes up a bit dazed in the morning, gets to the bathroom and says, "And what are you doing at home?" "Oh no, it's me." One moment. A bunch of madmen running together with other madmen towards annihilation. Madmen, like those who think Trump will be Jesus Christ, or like those who think Putin is Jesus Christ. They're all criminals. There's now this praise of the BRICS, the New World. But what is it? What's different about the new world compared to the old one? I still see materialism, money, power, weapons on an exhausted planet. How can the Earth withstand an exploitation attack from 5-6 billion human beings who want to consume like Westerners? So what project is Vladimir Putin selling me together with Xi Jinping? Nothing. Death. Oil. Pollution. It's not the new world. Atomic weapons. Putin allies himself with Kim Jong-un, North Korea. This chubby little boy who crushes his people and builds weapons. But what kind of world is this? And this is the new world? Just shoot yourselves. The new world. The new world is the new man. The man who loves. Man or woman, obviously. That is the new world. I only see old men who offer you the same things in different sauces. Commerce, money, GDP. It's not Antonio Albanese's Piluo, eh? That's something else. We are crazy. There is no new world. The new world is the new man. What the extraterrestrials desperately try to form with this beautiful knowledge they bring us. What I can tell you from my experiences is that the power of these beings is frightening. It's a type of power unimaginable to us, and yet it is of love. But they are powerful, so powerful, so beautiful, but so powerful. It's shocking, the real essence of these beings. It's wonderful, but at the same time, to us who are so petty, so low. But it's a wonderful world. I mean, they bring us a proposal that is very serious. Very serious. The extraterrestrial visit is very, 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 very serious. It hasn't been understood, unfortunately. All right. The question?
Good evening, grateful that I can be here. I am Camilla from Bolzano.
Voice Camilla, I can't hear you.
Thank you. So I am happy to be here. My wish has been fulfilled. And I have had an important question for 28 years.
Wow.
Meno male che sono venuto a Bolzano.
Good thing I came to Bolzano.
I have been following you since 2020. And I admire you very much for everything you say, for these lessons. And I am grateful that you have passed by here, that you carry forward this theme. And the question is this. 28 years ago, I was on vacation in Spain. And every night, a beautiful being came to get me. He took me to the mother spaceship. I saw many small ships. He taught me. He gave me lessons for 2 weeks. In the morning, when I told what I had dreamed, because it seemed to me that it was a dream, they made fun of me and said, "Mum, dreams of the Enterprise." And I never talked about this again. Never again. For years. Then I massaged a gentleman. In Vicenza, my job is reflexologist and masseuse. And, as Astar Sheraton taught me, who then introduced himself as captain of the ships, he told me not to stay in one place to work, but to travel a lot. I traveled Australia, Liechtenstein, Germany, and Italy. I formed many Reiki groups. Because Astar Sheraton told me, continue on this path. I did the 7 levels. And The impressive thing was that he told me that the time is imminent, that I have to have as many students as possible, and to pay attention to this phrase, that when we see the Christic signal, visible from all over, to go out, if we have an animal to go out with it too, because they appreciate animals like we do, to go out of the house, and then they will come. I remember the number 15, I don't know, 15 million or how much? Small astral ships that take us away. And it will last a short time. Then they bring us back to Earth. In that period, I learned a lot. I don't want to elaborate on this, but he showed me that they have houses ready for us. And I don't know how I entered. I floated. Yes, this phrase, that the time is imminent. When does it happen? I wrote something, and I would like to give you this book, but I didn't write about UFOs. I wrote about my life, about the concentration camp, and I am 84 years old. I traveled a lot, and now not anymore.
Have you reported?
Hai riportato, Camilla?
Have you reported, Camilla, also the experiences you had with them? Have you written them?
No. Why?
Write them.
I will write a second book.
Yes, write them and then I will share them.
Okay. Can I give this for the evening? Because I cannot.
Mille grazie e complimenti.
1,000 times thanks and congratulations. God bless you.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you.
No, ci vediamo sull'astronave.
No, we'll see each other on the spaceship.
When is the imminent time?
Sì,
Yes.
incredibile, eh?
Incredible, huh?
Io chiedo sempre segni.
I always ask for signs from the brothers because
Il paradosso è
the
che
paradox is that when you have them close,
li vorresti sempre
you would always want them with you.
e quando non ci sono
And when they are not there or they loosen their grip,
perché sennò
because otherwise
sbarelli,
you go crazy,
ti senti vuoto.
you feel empty.
Al che dico,
Then I say, but have you abandoned me? Are you there? Give me signs. Give me a sign. And so today, Camilla,
il segno sei stata tu.
the sign was you. Thank you, really, thank you.
Non è un fatto razionale, cioè io lo so che loro ci sono sempre.
It's not a rational fact. I mean, I know that. They are always there. It's a matter of heart, of emotion, of vibration. I don't know how to explain it. And so when it decreases a bit, you miss it, and then you feel disheartened. It's like when the person you love is not there. You would always want them with you. Maybe put them in your pocket, right? Like that. Instead, the contingency of everyday life leads us to move away. That's how it is with them. How imminent is it, Camilla? Even in this, there is a paradox, you see. When I met Eugenio in 1988, Eugenio said that in 1992 everything would be over. And instead, we are still here. And even in this, there is a paradox. Because if it is imminent tomorrow, it means that many of our brothers who are still sleeping will not wake up. And then this paradox is created that you would like to go with them now, but at the same time you would like to awaken as many people as possible. And so if you have less time, it's a problem. If you have more time, it's a problem. So in the end I resolved it this way, Camilla. It is definitely imminent. I agree with Giorgio Bongiovanni. It's difficult that we'll go beyond 10 years. Because the worldwide condition is very serious. Putin armed the nuclear missiles a few days ago. And so we are at loggerheads. Then the messages said that they will intervene with the forces of nature. Have you seen the disaster there in Spain? And also those in Italy, Emilia-Romagna. It's true that there is negligence of people, but the phenomena are much more violent than in past years. And so there will be an extension of time. Because with these disasters, a political crisis is created that is reflected on the military world, and therefore, they will not wage war immediately, but in the end they will, unless all of us commit ourselves with strength and with love in awakening people and convincing God to authorize the brothers of heaven to prevent atomic war. I told God, listen, but you know who your enemies are. Take them away. Make your stellar fleet intervene and have them deported wherever the hell you want. But also that, I don't want you to hurt them, but take them away. The good people, those who love life, the planet, who are peaceful, save them, free them, deliver us from evil, truly, of nuclear war. And yet he says, yes, son, but humanity does not deserve it. Humanity does not seek me, does not consider me. It is selfish, indifferent, doesn't care about the exterminations of Gaza, about children dying of hunger, doesn't care, it only thinks about pleasure, about materialism. So, what should I save?
E il Padre, Dio, vuole che rimanga impressa
And the Father, God, wants to imprint in the eternal memory of the humanity of the earth the folly of nuclear. You must see it to understand how crazy you have been, insane and hateful. You must live it. This is what God says. I say, okay, you're right, I can't disagree with you. And anyway, I commit myself. Maybe I can convince you. And he, all right, I accept the challenge. So it also depends on us, Camilla. You do your part, I do my part. And I go around and I move. I shout myself hoarse to bring to humanity the truth of a great lie and a great deception of which we are victims. Which is not just the extraterrestrial deception, huh? I mean, these people lie to us about everything, for heaven's sake. But the extraterrestrial deception is the most terrible, because there lies salvation. In the end, the truth about money, politics, massacres, that's fine. The revelation of the face of the Antichrist are all true, but in this situation, but if we accepted the extraterrestrial proposal, we free ourselves from everything. We solve the problem. But we have to commit ourselves. A few days ago, a few weeks ago, a person wrote to me, "Hey, Korea, you talk a lot and never give us proof. But what am I supposed to do, bring you the alien hanging in a bag? I don't know. I mean, what did I show today? I only show evidence. I bring documents, I bring photos, I bring videos, I bring testimonies. I mean, what should I bring you, the alien in flesh and blood? I mean, how can a person tell me that I don't give evidence? If anything, the problem is another, that you don't believe, that despite having the evidence in front of you, you prefer to think that all in all it's not true, for one reason only. Because if you accept that that is evidence, you have to move your ass. Instead, if you say that the evidence is not true, well, maybe I can mind my own business. That the problem in the end, dig deeper, is always and only this, the selfishness and indifference of humanity. However, time is more honorable than men. So all the skeptics, all the supermen, as the extraterrestrial message says, when they will smack their nose on the edge of the spaceship, hey, I'll laugh there. And I assure you that they will smack their nose badly. Indeed, they will hit their head on the wall. Because in front of this reality, you will only understand that you have lost a wonderful opportunity. This you will understand, and you will despair, but it will be too late. Please, question?
Hi, Pierre. Luigi from Bergamo.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So,
Hi, Gabriella.
earlier you informed us that the services and the power have technology and also the possibility to induce diseases.
Sure.
So, the beings protect who works for them, who accepts to collaborate, or, is there some kind of protection in this regard?
Of course. But the protection is, help yourself and God will help you. So it's not that we. I work for the extraterrestrials, so I don't care. No. They protect you, but you have to do your part. So I always have therapists who follow me. I take supplements. I get checkups because, apart from the fact that health is important, but I have to operate, I have to travel, I have to run, go on the roads, do research. I can't afford illness. Then, since in the regime of law of cause and effect, everything we live, including illness, is the effect of a cause. It's enough that I prevent the causes, the effects will not be there. Then I help myself, and by helping myself, they intervene in this research of mine. But if I stay still, they do nothing. That is, there must be. They never make up for our weaknesses. So we must always commit ourselves, sacrifice ourselves. When you do this, then they intervene. But first you have to move your butt. That is, apply the holy law of raise your ass.
Noi non siamo cagnolini.
We are not puppies. For extraterrestrials, they respect us as sentient beings. So when we ask them to be the solvers of our problems, they say, but if you don't get off your ass, why should we do it? After all, death doesn't exist. There is reincarnation. And if we take away from you the experience of living the effect of your causes, you don't grow. Instead, when you are warned that there is a pole, you arrogantly don't care. But when you hit your head and fracture it, then you understood that the pole was real, and that becomes your evolution. They cannot take away our evolution from us. So the whole discourse is always centered on the eternal laws that govern the evolution of beings, a field in which we are complete donkeys, frightening, ignorance. But the whole universe revolves around those laws. So if we want to interact with these beings, we must necessarily implement this knowledge they give us. But if we sit with a heavy ass, there's the alien anyway. They won't do anything. On the contrary, possibly they even make you sick themselves. There is an anecdote that Bongiovanni tells. As a boy, as a fanatic enthusiast of extraterrestrials, they would go at night on Mount Etna hoping to meet them. And he says, one evening they go with this car. They park there near Monte Sona Manfrey, and one says, but should we lock it? One of us stays to guard it. What do we do? And Giorgio says, no, there are the brothers from heaven who will watch over it for us. When they came back, they found it without wheels on 4 blocks. It's a true story, huh? Please. I mean, we have to evolve. They are masters. I mean, the pilot of a flying saucer, even the little gray, that was taken away by the Sioux, the Lakota Sioux. They called him the Elder of the Stars. They are wise. They are evolved people. They are masters. They have multiple degrees in various disciplines. Consider that according to the standard of an extraterrestrial society, a child in kindergarten already has a university master's education. A child in kindergarten. I mean, the average extraterrestrial graduate has 10, 15 degrees, but not like ours, like theirs. So we are comparing ourselves with a reality in front of which we really are bad, spiteful, stupid children. I mean, we compare ourselves with a reality that is at such a level that for us it is still unknowable. There was a very important contact in 1967 of this wealthy Dutch entrepreneur who was contacted by a physical civilization like us, except that these people in appearance, from our point of view, looked like big apes. They had heads like horses, 1 meter 40 tall, super muscular and stocky, with prehensile feet, because on their planet there is a gravity 4 times that of Earth, and atmospheric phenomena, with winds at 300 kilometers per hour. So in that type of environment, a type of powerful physical structure was evolved, capable of grabbing on with hands and feet to avoid being carried away by the wind. But these beings, from this, among other things, a beautiful man, 1 meter 90, blonde, an actor basically. There are photos of this person. So very high social class. He was a chief executive officer. He wasn't an employee. And he says, when I looked at them, I had to lower my gaze because their force of thought that shone through their eyes was so impressive, of superior level, that I had to lower my gaze. Then at his home, the French door of the kitchen he even had horses. This guy, because he was so wealthy and he had horse boxes and the horses would stick their heads out of the box, and he put a blackout curtain to cover the French door, because every time he saw the horses, the Yargans would come to his mind. And so he said, since the memory of their superiority of intelligence and thought, it destabilized me, stressed me in the end. I had to either sell the horses or not look at them. So since he loved the horses, he put this blackout curtain to not see them when he was in the kitchen. So we compare ourselves with a reality that is truly, I mean, it's impossible to understand, I assure you, because I myself, when I had the experiences, didn't. The first strong experience of contact that I had was so shocking that I lost the memory of the following 2 months. Because it completely threw me off. Yet I already knew Eugenio. I was studying, but contact is demanding, very demanding. It destabilizes you. It's a form of intelligence, of love, of relationship that it annihilates your molecules. Truly. It's very difficult to handle. I remember that I didn't want to live anymore in that period. I wanted to leave this world, it seemed to me. That I had been thrown into an infernal circle after touching this reality. But where am I? But what is this? My goodness, guys. Please.
Hi, I'm Roberto.
Where are you, Roberto? Here he is. Hi, Roberto.
We've talked about so many things. So God, extraterrestrials. We've talked about us. So I wanted to know a little, how do you put it all together? All this? A person gave me this example. We are. God is like a big flame, and we are like many small flames that are part of Him. and we have to move away from this big flame to understand. The heat we can transmit, the light we can create, and so on. So, I was wondering what relationship do you have, your thought about God? Extraterrestrials? Us? We, extraterrestrials, are still us in other dimensions, in other experiences, or?
All right, I understand.
And the last thing, you talked a lot about this flying saucer that fell, and so I was wondering, why would they have to leave their companions there, at our mercy, when they can do everything, because they aren't afraid of our weapons, they aren't afraid that and they can dematerialize.
Those bodies that were recovered were clones. That is, artificial beings. Intelligent, but artificial. And someone says to me, but did they suffer? Yes. But it was in the program. Did Jesus suffer? Yes. Why? It was in the program. That was necessary. So Roberto, if they had to give technology, pay attention to what I tell you now. They also had to give sentiment. They had to test those soldiers, those military, so that them knowing well how that world works, the feeling of suffering anyway, even if not in all human beings, triggers compassion. Is that clear? So those clones had to be intelligent and suffer, because extraterrestrials in their volumetric consciousness knew that compassion, that soldiers, not all, but some would have experienced seeing that suffering. Sooner or later they would have spoken, in case the power had made the choice to hide.
Vedi come ragionano questi esseri. È impossibile capire queste cose per noi.
Do you see how these beings think? It's impossible for us to understand these things. If Jesus had not really suffered, he wouldn't have, no trace of him would have remained. What struck us, what has triggered in the apostles, in the soldier Longinus who pierced his side, the conversion, were not the miracles. Jesus was made to go to the cross by the people, and the people are those to whom Jesus dedicated his miracles. It served no purpose. But his suffering, his blood, shook the souls of some men, who then became apostles and his disciples through suffering. So bless those who make you suffer. So those beings, like little Christs, even if they were clones, obeyed and sacrificed themselves for the great universal law of love, and this we still do not understand.
Quindi quando io dico che
So when I say that, when we see these discs in photos, in footage, we always have to think that there is a master there. There is a being that for us is a master of life and truth, not only in the scientific technological world, but especially in the ethical spiritual world, because everything they do, everything, obeys this law. And so they didn't use their scientific overwhelming power to give us those signs and those debris. They used the law of love, the law of Christ, which is the energy that holds creation together and that we don't respect, not even in our home. So even in the crash, or in the Roswell crash, there is a great secret, Christic teaching that no one has understood. God is a person, like you, like me. He's just more evolved. Period. And like all human beings, God has children, and we are his children. And like all parents, we send our children to school to make them grow and make them better. God does the same as a father. Indeed, since God is androgynous, he is father and mother. Why is Christ called the only begotten? Because he was born from the one, from the androgynous being, of light, which emits the mirror of itself. Androgynous solar beings can create only one child. That doesn't need to evolve. The other children they make must instead follow the standard law, incarnate, planets, evolution, and then, in a relatively long time, which is nothing compared to eternity, it's about 4 and something billion years, we will be like our Father, Creator gods. You are gods and will do greater things than I. So the truth is not difficult, Roberto. It's that they have filled our heads so much with a rotten mishmash that finding simplicity in this jumble of religious orthodoxy, New Age nonsense, terminologies invented out of thin air is a problem. But the truth is very simple. God is a human being. Has he made us in his image and likeness? Are we human beings? And necessarily, if he is the matrix, he is like us, he is a human being, an intelligence. Therefore, all this transcendence, which for centuries was needed to create little fables suitable for children, but today we are grown enough. We have discovered the universe, the great laws of physics. So, God, from myth that he himself created, like the little fable of Little Red Riding Hood, Tom Thumb, etc., etc. So he spoke to us like children. Today he speaks to us as his friends. Because our children at the beginning are our babies. But when they are adults, if you have done a good job, the child becomes your friend, talks to you as an adult. It's not that at 40 years old he comes in. Yes, it happens, but it's rare that someone at 40 years old comes home and mom goes, "Oh, my baby. Hi, Johnny. Hi, Alberto. Hi," one says. "What do you think about politics?" I mean, one discusses and debates as adults. So God today begins to speak to us as adults and reveals his nature to us, which is very close to ours. Already Christ 2,000 years ago began to tell us, "You are gods and will do greater things than I." I mean, our evolution will surpass the evolution that Christ had at that moment, because Christ at that moment was a seraphim of the 6th dimension. And we, like him and like everyone, will arrive sooner or later to the 7th dimension, meaning we will be in every way equal to our Creator. It's just a matter of time. It's a simple truth. It's not difficult to understand it. It's just that it involves responsibility. However, the revelation began 2,000 years ago, with that young man of 33 years who got himself killed like a dog, when he alone could destroy the entire planet. Just like that, he commanded the elements of nature. There from Galilee he would do like this, and like this, and Emperor Tiberius would fall into the sewer. Instead, he had to give us a great example of love.
Non c'è amore più grande che dare la vita per I propri amici.
Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. So these beings live according to this law.
Good evening, Pier Giorgio. I wouldn't have a question, but I would have an episode to tell you about when I was in Marca. One night I had woken up and I saw A man, he seemed all white to me, who seemed to be talking to me with signs. And then, when I tried to get a bit closer, he disappeared into nothing. Then I never forgot it. And it has been imprinted in my memory ever since.
Beautiful. It was one of these brothers.
Incredibile.
Incredible. Huh, Diego? Beautiful. Thank you, friends. It has been a great pleasure to be with you.